Who am I? You can guess that's a bad idea for me to say. Let's just call me Alex. What am I? That's a complicated question. A lot of people would say a bad person who did worse things. Not that I disagree. I'm not a hero. I'm a cautionary tale. My life can be summed up in one phrase. In over her head, but make no mistake. That is exactly where I like to be. I found myself in prison for 10 years. I'm not giving out the details, and if you don't know, it's rude to ask. What I will tell you is that I left that castle of cement and hatred on what any reasonable person would refer to as a technicality. I'm not proud of it, but freedom is freedom. Inside, I didn't put much work into reforming. What I did do was make friends with a whole lot of the worst kind of criminals you can find in an Arizona prison. But I stay where I'm comfortable. I found myself, 28, with a social circle composed of people they make true crime documentaries about. But I wanted to see how high I could turn up the heat. I'd escaped judgment once, and I felt invincible. Trust me, kids. No one is invincible. So criminals turn to psychopaths, psychopaths turn to occultists, and that is when things got interesting. As you can guess, for every 50 people I met claiming some connection with those things that go bump in the night, I'd find one who wasn't completely lying. And for every 10 people with a bit of truth to their story, one of those was likely to know anything really interesting. Those kinds of folks are notoriously protective of their secrets, but you don't spend 10 years of your life in prison because you're bad at asking questions. At first, it was party tricks, cursed daggers and living dolls gained from liberating a few fingers from some sad bastard that thought he was Aleister Crowley, or some neckbeard that amassed a collection of occult trinkets through a deep wallet. But even picking on the bottom feeders of the dark side of life attracted attention. Though by the time I saw anything really dangerous, I'd built myself up a little bit of a reputation, and spun that into a job, instead of being torn apart slowly and painfully. Little did I know, the same set of skills that helped me make friends in prison were also quite the asset in the darkest corners of our world. Combined with a little confidence and a lack of being squeamish, anyway. My skills are ancient, passed down in dark alleyways, the back rooms of seedy bars, and more recently, by every idiot with a pot of ink and a YouTube channel. I'm a tattoo artist if you're slow on the uptake. In prison, it let me make friends with the worst of the worst. To learn, to survive, to tread water until I carved out my own little niche. In the world I'm in now, it makes me a rare thing, a human being with something to offer. We modify our bodies for any number of reasons, from self-worth to self-hatred. Some folks spend a year and get an eclectic-looking piece of visual noise that has a whole lot of personal meaning. And some get a Ricky Martin back piece because they heard half a song they like on the radio. Humans are strange that way. Everything else, though. Tattoos, for them, hold power. They can summon, focus, bind, make something invisible, or make something look like your perfect mate. If they're done right, that is. If not, well, all that energy, all that power from the void, it has to go somewhere. And it never does so in a way lacking blood, gore, and destruction. And that isn't to mention the whole host of other services my boss and myself offer to our clients.
You mix the sulfur yellow yet?
My boss, he tells me his actual name would make at least one of my eyes boil out of my skull. I call him Scratch. At first glance, you would assume he is a person. A tall, professional wrestler-built guy with jet black hair. Slicked back in a style I'm not sure was ever really cool. Rockabilly-looking guy, lots of black leather and silver chains. For what I assume he is, he looks a little too on the nose if you ask me. But the more you look at him, the more you notice the things that look off. His skin is waxy with a yellow tint. When he talks, his lips barely move, and any other facial expression is too much to ask for. His eyes are black, concave orbs, deep pits in his face. I've learned not to look in them too long, or I find my normal love of minor bloodshed turning into a deep desire to spill the guts of anything slow enough I can get my hands on. And that hair, it pulsates and twitches like long, greasy slugs, reacting to every loud noise with a peristaltic wave. If I didn't, it's too late now to do anything about it. Takes 8 hours to set, and Mr. Skinny is coming in 15 minutes. I reply as Scratch walks into my studio. All the standards are there. Tattoo machines, inks, alcohol wipes, anything you'd find in an upscale shop. Because trust me, we don't charge stick and poke prices. But the rest of the shelf and floor space is devoted to what makes us special. Rare minerals, corpse ash, tongue of this and skin of that, circular saws with diamond-tipped blades for our sturdier clients' needs. And that's not including the back room, where Scratch keeps our fresh supplies.
You need not call him that again. It took me 5 years to find you, and I don't want to go having to look for someone else when he shows up in your closet looking to talk about your insult.
Scratch shakes his head, making the final checks to the equipment I have laid out. He isn't kidding. I don't know what Mr. Skinny is, but he uses cupboards like subway stations. And like clockwork, at 2:15 a.m., one long skeletal hand crawls out of the space below our lunchroom sink, followed by a cracked, yellowed bone shoulder. It should be impossible, but piece by piece, the massive skeleton, 9 feet slouching, wrenches itself from the small cabinet that under normal conditions has trouble holding all of our cleaning supplies. When I first met him, he looked like a normal, albeit tall, skeleton, but his body shows the signs of hundreds of thousands of dollars of cosmetic and functional work. Long, ragged eye sockets that glow a faint, dirty gray, every bone ending in a barb or point, dark pig iron enforcing it from the inside. Invisible, unless you know exactly where to look. I'm not going to try and transcribe its real name. It's a sound I've learned to pronounce, but no matter how softly I say it, I end up coughing just a little blood. I've been working for 3 hours, using a ball-peen hammer and a scratch-awl, dipped in a foul-smelling ink made of sulfur and lamb blood, to scratch intersecting runes over the surface of one of the skeleton's arms. Then the lights start to dim and flicker. A pressure builds in the air. I've been around some things that have diplomatic immunity to the laws of nature, but this presence chills me to the bone, sets off a deep-seated fear, long before the cause of it makes itself known. Scratch sits behind a desk, reading a magazine written in font that hurts to look at. One moment, he's relaxing. The next, he has a long black tentacle of smoke wrapped around his neck, raising all 7 foot plus of him off the ground, like a toy. He gets slammed into the wall, sending pictures of satisfied clients, legends, and monsters, all flying through the air and shattering against the cold industrial-style cement of the floor. The thing that comes in through our newly shattered doorway is an 8-foot mass of smoke, vague white and gray streaks giving the false impression of shifting features. At one moment, a tall, thin man in a suit. The next, the specter of death itself, skull leering, hood billowing. It never stops, as if trying to subject everyone looking at it to as many varied horrors as possible. Mr. Skinny rolls off the table, hiding behind a heavy steel desk. He's trying to tell me something, but most of the time I let Scratch do the translating. Now I'm wishing I didn't. The monochrome kaleidoscope horror hisses and bellows in a dozen different languages, each one feeling like someone found a new way to scrape nails across a chalkboard. Scratch is responding with sounds that a few years ago I would have never thought were a language. From my years here, I got the impression that whatever Scratch is, it's near the top of the food chain. Hell, most of his job is to make sure the clientele don't treat me like a minibar. But this thing was putting a look of fear across his corpse-like face. Tiny, almost two-dimensional spears of smoke stab into Scratch, his thick, gray blood coming out in corrupted spurts. I've seen a lot, but I know when to get out of Dodge. I set myself for a sprint, hoping I don't slip on any of the broken glass or other debris. I bolt out of the door to the studio, slamming into a wall to avoid slowing down. I turn for a mad dash to the door. The air gets cold and dry. I swear I can feel my skin start to become brittle. The thing pinning my boss to the wall turns to me. Its shifting features become bestial, almost wolf-like. I've been frozen in fear before. My first few years of prison, my first year or so of working here, happened from time to time. It's a natural human reaction. But eventually, anyone with a drive can train themselves to jump towards danger, to act instead of seize up. But what happened to me when that smoke thing looked at me, it was the farthest thing from a natural human reaction. My muscles felt dead and numb. Somehow, I stand, but I can't even force a scream as, without even stopping its torture of Scratch, the roiling cloud of evil makes its way over to me. It speaks in English now, dirtying itself with our tongue.
Oh, Festus, you didn't tell me you owned a human.
It says, its face, for a brief moment, becoming nothing more than a mass of overlapping white fangs. Blackness starts to creep in from the edges of my vision. I find myself wondering if I'm breathing. It gives me no comfort to realize I actually can't tell. But I do notice as the thing says Festus, dozens of small cuts and abrasions burst from my boss's skin.
This would clear your debt if you were willing to part with it.
Its voice was phlegmatic, lecherous. A human-like hand, somehow more eerie than the lashing barbs, stretches to me, the forearm impossibly long.
When did I say I wouldn't?
Scratch stammers. I'd spit at him if I could move my lips.
She's yours.
I'm praying for the darkness to take me, to let me at least not have to see what's coming for me from a mile away. But no such luck. If I were to take a guess, the smoke thing was making sure that didn't happen. It grabs my chin, somehow the barely cohesive hand having a steel-like grip. It begins to wrench my head to the side, exposing my neck. It keeps going. I feel sharp spikes of pain in my tendons as it twists beyond what I think I can take. And then suddenly, the pressure, the blackness, the helplessness is gone. I'm stumbling backwards as the thing starts to pull itself into something solid, something horrible, something that seemed like it shouldn't be able to fit in the room, something with too many eyes. A legend from a land of monsters. Then it speaks. That sick old man voice coming from the alien horror, making everything all that much worse.
You buried the lead, Festus.
It says. I hear another round of welts and lesions tear their way across Scratch's skin.
I'll take the chew toy. May take ever so long to break.
Limbs like an undersea creature exiled to a desert expertly disable Mr. Skinny. Claws clipping bone and fracturing joints. It takes hours. No one should have sympathy for Mr. Skinny. He's killed more kids than lawn darts. But watching the kind of torture that makes a thing like that scream like a wounded deer, it made me realize how little I knew about the world I found myself in. It was 15 minutes after the smoke thing took its prize before I talked to Scratch. "What the hell?" I said, holding back as much as I could. "You're going to sell me, Scratch?" If I knew a way to kill him, I'd have taken the chance already.
And you knew the risks when you signed up, Alex. Anything I can stop, I won't let it lay a hand on you. But what am I supposed to do if I can't? That's nature, Alex, or as close as things get around here. And you can deal with it, or you can leave.
Scratch says without a trace of shame.
Now, if you intend to stay, clean this shit up.
Days turned to weeks. and I felt myself sick with rage and paranoia. If I wanted to spend my life being walked all over, it would have been easy to avoid prison. But hip deep in scary story staples, finding leverage is difficult, but not impossible. She was about my size, 5'8", 150 pounds. And as I looked at her and her custom-tailored suit, I couldn't see anything that showed me she would be anything other than human. Besides her eyes, her light red irises seemed to constantly spin. She wanted a combination of scarification and tattoo from her jawline to her collarbone, inlaid with gold and silver wire, obsidian dust ink, and set with the ash of a dozen different holy books. Thick, harsh lines that were going to take a hell of a lot of slicing and peeling to create, and even more needling of raw flesh to tattoo. She stripped to her waist, and I washed the scalpel for the third time. Never one to take a chance. Never seen one like this before. Mind if I ask what it does? I say, making conversation. She smiles, as confident half-naked as most people would be with a gun and 6 friends backing them up. It stops those blessed with base attributes from imposing their will upon those of us who wield true power, she says cryptically. I'd thought to leave it at that, making nothing more than small talk as I cleaned and dyed her flesh, running thin silver wires, checking and rechecking the curves and angles. The finished work radiated power, the almost Egyptian-looking design pulling at the mind. No psychological test on Earth has good things to say about someone who has no regard for risk. By those metrics, what I did 2 weeks later could be considered crazy. Bold would be my choice of words. It was midnight. I sat in my living room, an empty box of lidocaine injections beside me, and a half bottle of vodka beside that. I'm wearing a pair of pajama pants I intend to throw away, and I've tied a handful of towels around my stomach to minimize cleanup. The pain isn't bad thanks to good old mundane medicine. I've given myself plenty of jailhouse tattoos. Everyone has to practice. But it takes a bit to get used to cutting and removing long pieces of my own skin. I make it through. The pain starts to break through once I start to tattoo the bleeding red fissures, and peaks once I start to lay the lines of gold wire. But I'm too focused, too angry to let it make me stop. As I place the last wire with gore-encrusted pliers, I feel something course through my body. A burning electric feeling radiating out from the fleshy carved rune. I feel giddy. I scream, totally caught up in the moment, blood-drenched towels falling to the floor. The ink and metal glow slightly as I feel a cramping movement deep within my chest. I briefly double over thinking I need to vomit, but nothing comes out. Everything next comes in flashes. I'm pulling things at random from my closet. I'm walking down the street in a fever dream haze. The few pedestrians I pass looking at me with disgust or fear. I'm in a bar, bright lights burning into my skull. Leering dipshits try talking to me. I laugh. I'm in an alley, stumbling. My mouth tastes like cheap booze. My vision is just starting to focus. I don't know where I am.
You took my girlfriend's purse.
I hear a drunken guy say from the other end of the alley. He's tall, over 6 feet, wearing a Motorhead t-shirt that was new when the band was, and a pair of biker boots that have never touched a motorcycle. I have no purse, his girlfriend's or otherwise. I shrug and turn around as if to say, I've got nothing but a mismatched outfit and an upcoming hangover. But he keeps walking over.
You got a wallet though, right?
His tone is different now. He's looking around. He sees no one. He's 10 feet away. I pat myself and find that either I lost or never brought my wallet. I'd rather just give this guy cash if that's all he's after. I try to relay this, but the right cross he throws sends me crashing to the ground. Snot and blood pour from my face. I stand and he shoves me back. I slam my head into the wall, barely stopping myself from falling a second time. He has a brass knuckle belt buckle, or rather, a set of brass knuckles disguised as a belt buckle. He unclips it as he stalks over, looming like a beer-soaked mountain. I feel a rattling in my chest, a peristaltic thrashing that starts off feeling like a heart attack. I begin to back up, hyperventilating, which brings a look of sick joy to the drunkard's face. A sharp pain, like pulling a tooth too early, starts in my jaw, and it makes its way to a few inches below my collarbone. Dull red light starts to pour from the rune. This gives the violent shit a moment of doubt. Not as much as when a fanged maw splits me from jaw to collarbone with a spray of blood. A moment of painful pressure in my lungs, and then a wet tearing noise, and a deep hollow feeling inside of me as something bigger than a basketball tears its way from me, tossing itself at my attacker. I see parts I recognize. What has to be lung tissue, some ribs, a heart, but all cut and resembled into a terrifying beast. It's a skinless monstrosity that lays in the middle of the Venn diagram of pit bull and Venus flytrap. Strings of sinew and sharp bones anchor to the drunk's chest as the man tries in vain to stop the featureless, almost claw-like jaws from shredding him with rows upon rows of jagged, serrated teeth. You're a better person than I am on my best day. I'm sure you would have done everything in your power to stop the thing from ripping the guy apart, layer by layer. But I didn't. I watched as the guy's strength started to fail, and the creature removed his pectoral muscles with one savage bite. I watched as he tried to wedge his useless arms between its jaws to save his face, doing nothing but delaying the inevitable. I watched as he begged me to call it off, and I watched as his words became a gurgling scream, his face reduced to a fleshless, shattered skull. I woke up sometime later, the first rays of sun starting to peek in from the end of the alley.
Hey, you alright?
Says a guy. At first, I think he's a cop, but once my brain starts firing again, I see the security guard badge. The corpse beside me is nothing more than a thin pile of gore. No wonder that isn't the man's first question. My mind is much more clear. I open my mouth to try and tell this guy some story to get out of here, but he falls to the side with a wet thump. I'm screaming. The creature is bigger now, legs more like a centipede, prying open the man's ribs as its blender-like maw works on rendering the man to meat gruel. I would have ran if I could, but something inside me wouldn't let me get out of eyeshot of the thing. When it was done, leaving 2 red stains in the alley, it leaped back into the toothed maw below my jaw. With a snapping noise, the maw seals, and I look down, once again seeing the rune. Mundane gold set in inflamed flesh catching the morning light. I haven't pulled any punches with who I am, but I know this. I tried to lock myself away, but this thing... It wasn't some paranormal attack dog or can of mace. It was a parasite, one with a cruel streak and its hands on my driver's wheel. The first week was a haze. I fought tooth and nail every time I could grasp a moment of lucidity, but the harder I fought, the quicker it would take over. Mail piled up as fast as the random piles of bones and cartilage. My apartment went from high class to slaughterhouse within days. At 3 weeks, I knew I couldn't stay. No matter how many manic cleaning sessions I tried, nothing was removing the deep, rotten meat stench that was now a staple of my place. Scratch called me almost nonstop after my 3rd no-show. I half hoped I'd come to and see him, but the more rational part of me knew that I'd likely become a liability. The creature got just a little bit bigger with each victim, a little bit stronger. Faster, smarter. There was no logical way it could still fit inside of me, but each time it decided to sleep or recharge or whatever it was, it managed to jam its lumpen, barbed form back into that forearm-length maw. And as it got larger, more fearsome, I became pallid, weak, I slept in parks, dumpsters, looking starving and emaciated no matter how much I ate, always dreading the next time it crawled its way from my body. Is it callous that I stopped keeping track of the bodies? Eventually all the deaths, all the horror, theirs, mine, just started to blend together. It was months later when Scratch managed to catch up to me. I was hunched over, skeletal, my chest sunken, maw above it open, the creature feasting on the last handful of people in the dive bar, nearly as big as a horse now. Single corpses no longer satisfied it. The walls were sprayed with blood, furniture destroyed. I'd realized that I've lost my last bit of control over this thing. My body, my life.
What did you do, Alex?
Scratch said, closing the half-destroyed door. I just didn't want to be prey, Scratch. I wanted something that would get me a seat at the table. Something to level the playing field, I say, taking a seat on one of the only undestroyed chairs. Scratch walks around, and he looks down, seeing the fanged mouth below my chin. He begins to back up toward the door, staring at the massive creature who has started to stir, crawling from the wall to the ceiling. I realize he wasn't being metaphorical. He didn't want an explanation. He legitimately didn't know what I did.
Alex, that thing is a god-eater. It hasn't killed anyone like me, has it? Anyone not human?
He wants to bolt, but he seems to need to know this. I stay silent for a moment. He starts to panic, pleading for me to give him an answer. Something inside me says this is important, but I don't care. He caused all of this. As his pleading turns to threats, I start to hum. An old tune from my childhood. My throat is dry. The sound is raspy and toneless. He's too busy with me to notice what is on the wall behind him. The creature makes a clicking, moaning noise as it opens jaws large enough to fit half of Scratch inside of them. And that is exactly what it does. Scratch is dead, and with that, the creature turned into something else entirely. No longer just a flesh and bone monstrosity. It radiated an evil malice and intellect. It wants me to tell you that the end is near, but that there is nothing to fear. Long before the God-Eater makes its way to you, it will make its way through all the things that go bump in the night. The end will be horror, and blood, and the stripping of souls. But the road there will be warm and safe. Take solace in this. Find joy as the monsters fall one by one, all giving their power to the God-Eater. And feel lucky, human, that you too have a spark of the divine inside of you. You will not escape its gaze. So says the God-Eater. What? You thought that was the end? Not in the slightest. No. The universe is never that merciful. Even when the only mercy you could expect is giving up your mind to some demon slug from God knows where. Real life doesn't have tidy little endings where the audience gets to rationalize how cowardice, vengeance, stupidity, and a tortured march to death and slavery are really an honorable defiance and a heroic ending. I told you what the God-Eater wanted you to know, but it wasn't done with me. Once it had eaten Scratch, things changed. It changed. No longer was it a lumbering beast of discarded body parts and distilled evil, just striding from mindless kill to mindless kill. Now it was something else. The first time it spoke, I felt its mind. It reached out, flaying my psyche, knowing me in an instant. It was a dark red lesion now, the size of a sedan, anchored to the floor of the dive bar with pulsating mauve tendrils. It was undergoing some kind of metamorphosis.
You will find me more of the little gods,
was its simple command. And that command hit me as hard as any hunger pang or lack of sleep. It was as if following this creature was as much a part of who I am as my own body. The universe is a funny thing. When you were getting beat down, it seems like every atom inside of it is dedicated to making your life hell. But at the end of the day, the universe isn't out to get you. It's worse than that. The universe is just a complete bastard. Sometimes, though, that gets pointed in the right direction. See, where I worked, we saw urban legends and cryptid wannabes 5 days a week. But we were a nexus, not in some metaphysical sense. We just happened to be one of the few types of places that things that go bump in the night tend to congregate. But without that shop bringing them in, the God Eater found out the hard way that getting face to face with something paranormal is damn near impossible. Something millions of people who have wasted their lives looking already know. After a week of fruitless nights searching every abandoned building and dark tunnel in the city, the massive glistening lesion seemed to dry, begin to flake. It stopped speaking and eventually crumbled into a disgusting pile of rotting meat. I thought I was free. I thought it starved to death. Do I even need to tell you how wrong I was? It fused itself with the building somehow, pumping the walls full of its vile flesh. Every table, every counter ran through with the creeping veins of the God Eater. When it spoke, the hunger I could feel was all-consuming.
harvest timber for our construction.
I didn't understand the words, but I knew the meaning on an instinctual level. I half think it only bothered with the voice of God routine to shake me. Instead of going on fruitless hunts for demon dogs or Slender Man knockoffs, I began the all-too-easy task of finding more mundane prey. I shouldn't be walking. My body is skeletal, my chest sunken into a collapsed pit. My hair has begun to fall out in thick clumps. I tried to shave it, but my skin is so dry. I was tearing off nearly as much scalp as hair. Not that I bled anymore. My wounds just stay. No blood, no rot, no red swelling of infection. Just missing pieces of myself, plain as day. I've taken to using an old hypodermic and any ash or ink I find to cover up the wounds, preferring the jagged, almost tribal-looking patches of tattoo work to the gray flesh and muscle under my paper-thin skin. But that's not how anyone saw me when I left the bar. I could tell by the longing or jealous looks I got that people were seeing me as some kind of powerful beauty, not whatever I was now. And that made getting timber entirely too easy. Strangely, I never felt violated in any meaningful way by the God Eater living inside me, but the overwhelming sense of content and joy it forced upon me when I brought it its victims, bound and hobbled. That was a violation beyond my ability to describe. To change me so much, to flick a switch somewhere in my brain just to make its gruesome job a touch easier. I can't think of much worse. There was no passing out anymore, no coming to long after the deeds had been done. I didn't even sleep. 24 hours a day on the prowl, losing pieces of myself in knockdown, drag-out fights with people who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I tried to be sloppy, to leave plenty of clues, scream, set off car alarms, anything that might attract the attention of people who could find out what was going on and stop it. But it became more and more obvious. The God Eater was stopping that from happening. The bar started to build itself, Tables refurbished, lights flickered to life, cracks in windows sealed themselves, and eventually I found myself standing in a fully stocked, almost cozy, little bar and grill. One morning, the doors creaked open as the first rays of light began to creep on the windows.
Serve them,
the God Eater said, its voice making the words both a command and an insult at the same time. And it was over these long months I began to come up with my rules, my little ways of saving what was left of myself and my sanity. Rule 1 was to never go in the kitchen. At night, it reeked of rotten meat and cat piss. During the day, it looked like it was fully staffed. But if you watched long enough, you'd see the meat puppets within acting a little strangely, repeating meaningless tasks, phrases, holding gibberish conversations, or even a time or two, screaming for half a second, a look of understanding and fear on their faces, before being dragged to the back of the kitchen by their fellows. Rule 2. No getting to know the customers. The God Eater took a sick pleasure in letting me get close to a couple of people, even going so far as to convince me I could have someone to love as a reward for my service, before ripping them apart and forming them into gaudy wall art that sat directly in my eye line. Thomas, he fought. Janet, god damn, I think she had this shit half figured out before she met her end. Rule 3. Stay in the zone. During the brief period where the bar was closed, I was allowed to do what I want with my time. Of course, the first thing I did was try and make a run for it. About 2 miles from the bar, my body started to tingle, then a mild burning pain. I keep going forward, slowly, one arm extended. It was like I hit some kind of invisible wall. I took a step, and my hand went limp. Another, and my arm started to sag below the elbow. I tried jamming my head through the invisible barrier, hoping to end it all. But I just ended up waking up on the floor of the bar, minutes from opening. The God Eater got plenty of victims then. When free drinks randomly arrive on your table, you'd be surprised how many people will imbibe until they pass out in a booth. Normally, not a problem. But in this case, the booth, without fail, would turn into a massive bear trap-like maw once the other patrons had left, and slowly close around the sleeping drunk. I knew it had to have a greater plan. I could feel that black pit of hunger within it. These meals. They kept the lights on and the table shiny, but without some paranormal fare, the God Eater couldn't become stronger. It was 4 a.m. I was sitting on a bench in a disused park. It was silent, a little foggy, and I was alone. About the best I could ask for. I should have seen the man coming, but instead it was like he simply walked out of the fog about 20 feet in front of me. He was tall, 6.5 feet at least, but lanky. He was in his mid-50s, dressed in an old tuxedo, complete with top hat and cane. He'd almost have put off a Fred Astaire vibe, if it wasn't for his dead white skin. Shrunken heads, hands of glory, vials of smoky liquid hung randomly from his suit, alongside dozens of other smaller occult trinkets. I'd be scared, but if this guy can figure out a way to put me out of my misery, he can have at it.
Oh my Alex, you are looking like the devil's breakfast, aren't you?
He says. That voice, so familiar, scares me despite my fatalistic intentions. Who the hell are you? I say, standing up, a pitted, rusted gas station knife in my hand.
Oh, you don't recognize me?
His grin goes high enough up his face I can see tendon and cheekbone. The fog around me stirs and starts to raise, swirling above us. A face, one I haven't seen before, leers down on the two of us. A bestial visage that wanted to take me for a debt, like I was an electric guitar.
I could be more dramatic if you want, but I thought it better this way. Just two things that used to be human, once upon a time, having a chat. You can call me Demetrius. A bit more cordial than Mr. Smoke or whatever oversimplified label you'd given me.
And with that, he confirms what he is. I'll call you an asshole and hope you kill me for it if it's all the same. I take a step forward, hoping to prod him into action. He laughs.
And what did I do exactly, Alex? Was I the one that got you put in prison? Did I make you seek out occultists to torture and rob? Or maybe I had you filing werewolf nails and dyeing ghost sheets, 2 seconds away from death. All I did, Alex, was try and collect a debt. I'm sure it does nothing for your ego that you would have been currency, but that's all it was. Do you think I was the one who sent you down this path?
He sounds legitimately amused, one eyebrow raising and possibly high, awaiting my answer. Maybe. Get to the point, Demi, I reply, staring death in the face, scared to my core, but refusing to blink.
It wasn't me. I'd forgotten about you minutes after I started on the chew toy. It wasn't your boss. He was strong, but he was a thug and a moron. Too stupid to ward his door against someone he knew he owed a debt to. So?
Demetrius led me to the answer. The lady? I say, understanding where the conversation was going, but not why.
Give the hollow girl a prize,
he says, clapping his hands slowly.
She slipped right under your radar, didn't she? Just another mark, another person to use to your own ends. Or maybe you thought she was some put-upon void child, a fae, maybe a forest spirit just looking for a way to protect herself from the big bad men in this world, and the other. No, Alex, you were human. I was human. Scratch, he was something more, but couldn't find any way to truly use that power. But her, she is a legend, one you've heard of in fairy tales and campfires. See, you think of power as turning into a smoke monster, or an eldritch whore, being born with claws and fangs, eating bullets like popcorn. But all those things are just tools. I came at Scratch with one set of tools, the chew toy with another, and you, I come to like this.
He's getting off on the monologuing. This man, or thing, or whatever it is, it has power. More than I've ever seen. But he also has a terminally ironic case of short man syndrome. He looks deep in thought, forming a flowing, liquid ball of black smoke in one hand. He transfers it from one hand to the next, showing his control over forces I couldn't even name.
Right now, you could kill me with that knife, really. This form of mine is older than it has any right to be, fragile, nearly falling apart. But I know you won't. You are too afraid. You want a way out. And that is why you are going to be nothing more than a passenger to the God-Eater's rampage.
He laughs in a way that makes my piss boil. One of the best lessons you learn in prison is that when someone sticks out their chin, daring you to strike, that is the one place you don't throw a punch. Another is that bullies reveal way too much about themselves if you let them talk. I see a rock about half the size of my fist. Then why are you bothering me? Hot topic out of shit to pin on your coat. My voice is steady. My mind is begging me to run.
Why? I want to watch the show, of course. The situation is nothing if not unique, and I'm resourceful enough, should the worst happen. I'll pop up safe and sound 500,000 miles away. And up close, your pain is so much more entertaining, so much more fulfilling. You see, what you are is...
I don't let him finish. I take my chance. The blow lands. The sound of rotten wood being struck with a hammer accompanies Demi stumbling backwards. He's either hurt or playing at it well. One cheekbone is caved in, a large flap of skin dangling almost down to his shoulder. He's trying to get his bearings. I can see a look of rage in his remaining eye. The second strike is more haphazard. It bounces off of his shoulder. Demi grabs me with one arm. I'm inches away from his rotting corpse face, staring at mold-filled sinuses and the cracked stubs of teeth. His other hand is raised, encased in shimmering black smoke. Before I can even react, he plunges it forward. It spears through my chest. As he wrenches it back, I can feel a cold breeze waft through my body. It doesn't stop my next blow, which drops the creature to its knees as it caves in on one side of its frail skull. I stand there, fist-size hole through me, somehow panting with rage, still standing, still a woman who has never had a problem giving out injury. I break his collarbone. His left arm goes limp and useless. He falls backward and starts to mumble something. Rocks and loose debris beginning to rattle and shake. Keep talking, I'll rip your goddamn jaw off. If I so much as see a vape cloud float in our direction, I'll take your head from your shoulders. It's time for some answers, Smokey. I crush one knee, then the next to make my point. The fog dissipates. What is the God Eater's plan? What can I do to stop it? I've been in this situation before. Many times. Sometimes a beating won't do the job, but killing someone is impractical. For the first time in a long time, I feel in control. Demi starts laughing. He keeps it up for a few seconds as I grind a heel into his shattered kneecap, the chortle taking on a psychotic tone. It warms my long-gone heart to know this guy isn't used to receiving pain.
Do you think I know that? Oh, Alex, that thing is part of you. It has its wants and needs, and those don't change, but the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. How it gets what it wants, you'll have to ask yourself that question. And what to do? You oblivious damned prey animal. You won't be able to do what needs to be done. That's why it's so amusing to watch you flounder for any solutions but the obvious. It took things from you, but it left just as much. Here's the catch though. You will never know what it left you without experimenting. Maybe you consume godlings or humans and take their spark. Maybe you can touch spirits. Maybe you grow strong on fear and pain. But figuring out any of that takes dark experimentation. I know you, Alex. You were an accidental monster at best. There are lines you cannot cross even to save yourself or those you love. By the way, how are Thomas and Janet doing?
Even broken. Likely dying. The thing is still trying to get in my head. Trying to hurt me emotionally. The hurt I dole out in response is much more physical in nature. I forego the rock, lacerating my own flesh and bone for the visceral joy of pounding the thing's face into a mass of rotten flesh and bone fragments. He's twitching, slightly, as I flip him over, putting my knife to work. His insides are like rubber cement. I can see why he was comfortable with being shanked. But I stab, and I cut. And after 20 minutes, I'm reaching one hand deep inside, tearing out a dried, desiccated liver. I've crossed plenty of lines I never wanted to. By accident. On purpose. All to further my own ends. The fact he thought this would change just because the stakes went up makes me smile as I take the first dusty bite of his liver. The body is still convulsing as I walk back to the bar. Over the next 2 months, I notice something strange. Our clientele starts to consist more of families, but they come well past dinner time, usually starting to filter in around midnight. The more I pay attention, the more odd things I notice. A mother hiding horns under an oversized hairdo. A small child with pitch black eyes. An entire family who spoke without actually moving their lips. I'm no genius, but it doesn't take one to figure out the first part of what's happening. The God Eater has put out some kind of call, some kind of beacon to draw in the paranormal. The second part makes what Demi told me make sense. I realize it's not bringing in the biggest, scariest things. Its call went out to those on the edges. I see a lot of human entity couples, It disgusts me until I remind myself it's been nearly a year since I've been human, or other things that are strange, but not exactly combat capable. Seeing my own worst qualities amplified, refined, and taken to the extreme hurts me enough. I think for a brief second that I have no soul left. As the months go on, I spend my time waiting for the other shoe to drop, helpless to do anything about it. With every passing day, the place seems to become more popular. The hours shift later and later. I took to wearing an oversized hoodie, hiding my flesh bare and cord form, mostly for my own sake, as I know damn well the God Eater is making me look like whatever it wants. But my body has been doing some strange things as of late. Things I don't like to stare at every night. At first, I thought it was my ink just boiling out of my skin. Slang term. Happens to a lot of people in outdoors jobs who are just too stupid to take care of their investment. But the slow, steady weep coming from each tattoo eventually produces much more fluid than I injected myself with. Just another symptom of being a walking corpse, I guess. If I was a storyteller, I'd say the night it happened seemed like any other in my hellscape of an existence. But I want all of you to know the truth. Well, most of it anyway. I could feel the difference the second the doors opened. Every surface looked strange. The air was humid and had a faint smell of bad breath and sage. I could hear glasses and bottles twitching, as if in anticipation. It was our busiest night. A couple dozen families at least, almost 100 people, entities, and whatever else having a blast in their favorite watering hole. It was doing something to them, though. To the adults, at least. A dinner turned into drinks, turned into appetizers, then drinks again. Come 3:45, the kids, whatever they may be, were miserable and tired, the adults drunk and happy. It started with a low, deep, moaning roar, the quickest of the patrons making a break for the front door. Neither booze nor the psychic pool of the God Eater overwhelming their minds. They died first. The inside of the building seemed to suddenly, in one violent motion, expand. No longer were we sitting in a mid-sized bar and grill, but a massive, almost cave-like structure. Organic purple walls and stalactites, pits of boiling gelatinous fluid. A little hell for little gods. Those near the walls were stretched to their breaking point in an instant, entrails bursting across the chitinous floor. Deformed bodies splayed out for meters, faces screaming in impossible contortions. At the very far ends of the cave, barely visible, I could see the bar's 3 windows. One catches my attention. Something is passing by the outside. A hand, waving. I focus. I almost think I can see a face I recognize. But at this distance, in the strange, dark red light, it could be anything. The panic starts. Sides begin to form almost instantly. Certain types of entities hurling accusations based on centuries of slights and atrocities. Who is and isn't human is clear now. Glamours and illusions dropped. I can see a handful of different creatures, but not one is anything you couldn't kill with a shotgun and a set of metaphorical balls. I see nothing I can lean on to tear its way out of here. Hey! I scream, cutting through the din, stepping up to the crowd. I can tell they see the thing I've become, not the pinup I've been presented as. If you want an explanation, we're all dead. And not only that, all you Tom Savini Project-looking people have a special hell in store. If you want some kind of chance, we need to try and get to one of those windows.
And then what?
A man with long, almost spider-like fingers asks, a bit too aggressively for my liking. I don't have a fucking clue. Not one. But what I do know is if anything here is a way out, it's the windows. This isn't a riddle. There isn't a right answer. This is a trap all of you have stumbled into. Maybe we can get out of it, and maybe that's going to take chewing off our own foot. You think you have the stones for that, with your stupid goddamn hands? Or should we just leave you and your family here? Choice is yours.
No one is going to force you to come along, and I think our chances are about the same without a cut-rate salad fingers.
I end this standing face to face looking up at the entity. He's about to stammer a reply when we hear a scream come from off in the distance. Small, childlike. A small child stands 100 feet away. Something has brought itself from one of the puddles, a massive tube of muscle and bone hooks, with a maw that splits into 4 pieces, revealing, seeking, grasping tendrils. It's silent, not a scrape, not a roar, not a drip from the pus and saliva dropping from its maw. I'm running first, but 2 men, the child's parents from what I remember, get there first. They're fast, running low to the ground. I get hopeful that maybe I underestimated the group. Hope is dashed as quickly as their skulls against the rock-like outgrowth of the floor. The tendril that grabs each by the leg. Nothing more than a blur. The massive worm throws the bodies into the group. Panic ensues. I should have turned around, but I thought the God-Eater wouldn't harm me. That I was too important. I was wrong, again. Just as I reach the child, something spears me through the side, just below what's left of my ribcage. I feel dozens of tiny barbs extend inside of me, slowly rotating. I can't help but scream. The pain, the slow, grinding pain takes over. I do nothing but tug ineffectually at the spiked tendril as it tosses me into the maw. The jagged teeth make short work of the hoodie, deftly tearing it away in pieces. I feel the first barb hit my bare skin. I lose hope, giving in to this force of nature that has me at its mercy. When the worm makes a sound, it's like the shriek of a spoiled toddler amplified to a painful extent. Petulant, offended, angry. I skip across the ground for what seems like forever. I'm dazed, staggering to my feet. I look down, thinking I see nothing more than bones, but other than the wound through my side, there isn't a mark on me. What there is dozens of tattoos constantly dripping grayish-black fluid. It soaks through my shirt and pants, my hair, what's left of it, is long seaweed-looking strands plastered to my skull. The worm thrashes, smoke coming up from deep within its body. It bashes itself against the wall, the floor, as if it's trying to end its pain. Something that seems to blend into the shadows breaks from the group and grabs the child, speaking in low, soothing tones. The adults form a circle around the kids, where the shadow thing plants its charge. The worm stops moving with 2 massive bouts of vomit, breaking apart into nothing more than meat and teeth. The group stares at me. Heads with 5 eyes, or 3 mouths, stare at me, as if I'm an angel or the devil itself. I'm not one for speeches. I walk toward the window where I may have saw that face that I never expected to see again. The walk should have taken an hour or 2, max. We realized something was messing with time or space after the second day of the grim march. We lost people to the terrain, spiked pits opening in a flash and swallowing people in a burst of gore. We lost people to creatures seemingly designed on the fly to target the scariest members of the group. Scuttling crab-like beasts, the worms, or swarms of tiny round insects reduced our group to fleeing instead of standing and fighting within 5 days. But it wasn't until the end of the first week when we lost the first child. No one saw it happen. Somehow, the kid just disappearing into the shadows was more of a blow to morale than any public evisceration. We knew something bad was in the works when we had a day of peace. It was confirmed when we saw something massive forming in the distance. A mountain range of a creature growing out of the ground like fungus. None of the 8 adults left are whole. Long, ragged wounds patched with shirts and pads. Missing eyes, fingers, and one poor bastard. A pot-bellied welder that lost his wife. A tall woman with a mouth that extended to her ears, who managed to tear herself free of a worm, but not to survive the experience. Nursing a massive belly wound that was slowly killing them. When I get a good look at the quadrupedal creature, standing 20 feet tall, guarding the window, I know there is no way our walking wounded are going to be able to take it down. It has no head, no mouth, Just two massive, faintly glowing eyes, looking at us with disdain and rage. It's all bare muscle, clawed feet, and swarms of mites hovering around like heat haze. I cry, gray, thick tears cutting lines through the inky mess of my skin. To come this far, to fight this hard, for nothing. I know what these things can and can't do. We have no little god in the machine, no deus ex machina to save the day. My mind goes to that place, that same place it went when Scratch came looking for his answers. I try to keep it together, but I drift. I hear questions, but I'm far away. I hear myself humming again, almost as if from far away. I wrench myself back from the brink of insanity with a scream. Suicide mission or not, the one thing I've learned so far is not to make the same mistake again and again. Who wants to die for their kids? I say, getting to my feet. We found out early in our journey. The crap pouring out of me is toxic to anything with a pulse, but it takes a while before overwhelming the person's system. If I was still keeping count, I'd say finding that out added 3 more innocent people to my body count. My plan would add 8 more. But if it worked, at least it would save the remaining 16 kids. Probably not enough to make even on the day I finally die, but a step in the right direction. I embrace each of the adults in a tight hug, whispering my thanks to each one, as the ink from my body seeps into their clothes and skin. Their pupils dilate, the poison already starting its work. They are all too tired to run, but they jog, entity and human alike, dripping ink and flesh to meet their fate. I stay back with the children, hoping our marching dead can distract the thing for long enough. They're half blind and raving by the time they reach the monster. I hear the Colossus laugh, a deep, confident rumble as it stomps the welder in an instant. It's off balance, though, as it recoils its foot like it touched a hot stove. Even in death, the welder didn't stop fighting. I tell the kids to watch the wall as we start to move forward. Their parents screaming obscene curses as they climb the beast, leaving smoking furrows in its flesh. We break into a run as the beast slams into the wall, turning 2 of the adults into caustic paste. I dive, saving a bald, fang-toothed 8-year-old from a piece of falling debris. We make it to the window and I throw myself into it, not caring if I lose the rest of my scant flesh going through, but I bounce off it as if it was solid steel. I pound my right hand into a skeletal mess, streaking the surface with chunks of flesh. Not a scratch. The beast throws the last of the adults. A woman with an anemone-like crop of red hair at her feet. Half of her, anyway. Even through her dead white eyes, she searches for her child, softly calling its name. The beast turns, hurt, raining its foul ichor upon the ground, but still very much alive. A tapping at the glass. I see the last person I'd think or want to see. Demi. Face held together with iron staples, and black thread grins at me. The remains of his teeth capped in shining gold and silver. He splashes one of the vials from his jacket on the window. It becomes pitted and blurred in seconds. With nothing more than the tap of his cane, the window crumbles like melting snow.
Quickly now,
he says. Wafts of black smoke beginning to grab the children. The beast tries to squash me as I throw a 4-year-old in a short flight to the thing I thought I killed. My body burrows through its tree trunk of a leg, and I step out of it like a set of stage curtains. Demi is standing across the street. I vault out the window, knowing sooner or later the God-Eater would find a way to restrain me. He holds a black glass flask, what looks to be a wick made of human hair coming from it.
Would you like to do the honors?
He says casually, lighting the wick with a flick of his fingers. I say nothing as I take the bottle, glowing with a strange white flame, and toss it through the window. In an instant, the bar is filled with a roiling white fire and the screams of the God-Eater. I watch, finally, thinking the horror is done.
That's going to put it down for a while, not kill it, if that's what you're thinking.
Demi says. I'm still transfixed, watching the building already start to break and crumble. What's your deal, Demetrius? I say, confused. He laughs as if landing a good joke.
That is a complicated question, and we'll get to it in time. Right now, though, you are free of the God Eater's influence, and you have to decide, do you hide and hope all turns out for the best? Or are you ready to cross some lines and get vengeance?
He sounds a little giddy. I don't know how much I can trust Demi, but if at the end of the day, I get my hands on the woman responsible for all of this, I don't really give a shit what lines I have to cross. I come from a special family. Not that I expect you to be surprised with that. Wouldn't be very interesting if there wasn't something out of the ordinary about us. I could write you 90 pages on the specifics of what we do, but you're a bunch of smart people, so I'll keep things short. We're hunters, and I don't think I have to tell you I'm not talking about deer and rabbits. It's me, Victor, my brother Norm, and our sister, Tamara. I'll skip over the part where I tell you how sad it is when we lost our parents. They were soldiers, just like us. They wouldn't want us whining about it to strangers online. We sat in our basement, huddled around the 2000s era computer we use when browsing parts of the web not intended for human eyes. Doesn't look like much, but it has a history. Dark and esoteric enough, it almost has a mind of its own. Hasn't failed to keep us safe from prying eyes yet. But I've never been a fan of keeping any kind of tainted object around.
When is it gonna start working?
Tamara says. She's 6'2", and if I said she was built like a linebacker, I'd probably embarrass half the NFL.
After you ask that another 6 times.
Norm says. Miserable prick most of the time. Wire thin, always rocking 2 days of scruff, and usually in need of a shower. I give him hell for that last part, but I can understand why he avoids bathing. Lost 4 toes as a teenager, something our parents were chasing sent a swarm of god-awful chittering bugs up through our pipes. Left him with a nasty limp, and a hatred of hygiene. And as for me, I kinda wanna lie and say I'm a Vin Diesel-looking guy. Cool scar going down one eye, all that stuff. The truth is, I think, a 30-year-old Steve Buscemi who hits the gym 5 days a week. The screen flickers to life, bringing up a website we're looking for. A tiny woman, a little over 5 feet, maybe 140 pounds, with tan skin and dark hair, sits behind a large, black, oak desk. She wears a sharp business suit. It's tailored perfectly, giving her a powerful, aggressive look, despite her size. You'd assume she was human at first glance, with the exception of those constantly spinning irises. But we know better. We've been tracking her for the better part of 3 years. She's a child of Hamlin, which is pretty much exactly how it sounds. One of the original 36 children taken from their home. Payment for services rendered by the Piper. They say they drowned in the story, because the real truth is so much worse. The Piper never wanted payment. He wanted an army. He twisted and warped the children, giving them a piece of himself. And within each of them, that seed grew. Each child rivaling the Piper in raw connection to the void. But one was not satisfied with the powers of a mere legend. She wanted more. So she stalked her brothers and sisters, enacting dark rites to strip them of their power, of their souls, and as each one fell, she became more than human, more than monster or demon. She became a force of nature.
It's that time of the decade again, superfans. That's right, we at Pretsu are hiring. Do you have the skills needed to be a valued member of my team? Are you sick and tired of waiting weeks or months for proper prey? Well, then Pretsu may be for you. We have 6 open positions, and we will be holding interviews on October 15th, from midnight till 3 a.m. Preference will be given to new blood entities and those with current popular presence in the public mindscape. We look forward to seeing all of you there, and bringing some new life to the Pretsu team,
the woman says. Upbeat outro music plays, and with a whimper from deep within the computer, the screen goes black. Son of a bitch. You did it, Norm. 3 years, man, and we finally have her, I say, clapping my brother on the back. Pretsu. Where to begin? I'd call it a creepy restaurant, but it's more an arcade with a heavy carnival food theme. Animal makeup is the disguise of choice to cover up the employees' more interesting traits. At least there isn't animatronics, though, right? It has no fixed location, popping up in random cities, making people think it's been there for years. But Tammy, she cracked the pattern, which we figured out was absolutely useless without a date to sync things up with. But armed with the time, we have a place. For those of you not in the know, a hunter is a technical definition. It's not any idiot that picks up a gun and tries to take revenge for a campsite massacre. Those people are nothing more than angry victims, not hunters. Hunters are born into families with a long history of dealing with the paranormal. So long as their essence, I'd say soul, but that tends to raise hackles and cause a lot of useless debate, has adapted, giving them traits that let them stand in front of the worst monsters the world can throw at them. Norm, he has a way with objects. Haunted car, cursed pistol, sentient computer. He's more comfortable talking with them than he is with people he's known for his entire life. Not too shabby with the less intelligent entities either. Tammy, she breaks things. She can grab a ghost, smash a cursed pendant in one hand, and on more than one occasion, I've seen her knock something out that had eaten a grenade moments before. If she's attacking something, the universe seems to rearrange things just a little bit to make it a fair fight. And me, I know things. Not through research, though I do plenty of that. But when I'm looking at something that shouldn't be there, I get little glimpses into its history. If it sounds like I got shafted, well, once upon a time, I did a lot more. But that's a story for another time. We might not be the best in raw power. I've seen folks do shit I'd damn near call magic. But the 3 of us have been making a bit of a name for ourselves. We work well together, and it shows. Pretsu, that will be our claim to fame. Van Helsing had Dracula. We will have the child of Hamlin. The outside of the building did not hint at the congregation of evil waiting within. We all expected something more sinister. Rusted signs, cracked windows, hell, even just some creepy voice playing over loudspeakers. But what we saw was a legitimately inviting family-friendly barcade-type place. Soft neon sign, painted windows, and as the name implied, a general zoo-style theme. Tammy kicks in the door, aiming down the sight of a massive tactical shotgun.
Don't goddamn move.
Firing a round into the ceiling. Norm and myself walk in a few steps behind, scanning the crowd. I'm armed with a MAC-10. Its cheap wire stock tight to my shoulder. Not the best gun on earth, but this one's spent a decade between realities. What exactly that means, go ask Norm. And speaking of my brother, he walks in armed with nothing because he's a fucking lunatic. Half the time I can't tell if the crap he pulls is esoteric crazy or just regular, should take into a shrink crazy. We see 20 or so various entities. They seem to consist of 4 main groups. I call the first one the Humane Society. Bunch of animal-like things, big, deformed, and nowhere near the werewolf boyfriend I'm sure half of you are thinking. The second was the smoking section. Things that seemed to have no real form. Wisps, ghosts, specters, all seemed to hang out in a shadowy gloom. The third group I deemed the remains. Rotting ghouls, ghasts, and revenants, staring blankly as we kicked in the door. And finally, there were the new kids. A couple tall, impossibly skinny guys. Faces obscured deep in hoodies. An obese man with a tube television monitor embedded in his stomach. And a few other seemingly slapped-together entities. The type of weird shit we see more and more lately. A single ghast, a leather-skinned corpse with needle-like fangs, breaks free of the crowd, leaping through the air like a flea. I chuckle slightly. I don't need the paranormal flash to know this thing is young. The fact it seemed to think that we were 3 random victims told me everything I needed to know. Tammy shrugs off the massive backpack containing our heavy equipment and holds the shotgun with a single hand. The gas starts springing from arcade cabinets, support struts, and even the 20-foot-high ceiling, creating an impossible-to-predict angle of attack. Impossible for most people. Tammy catches it by the back of the neck. Its infectious bite neutralized. It snaps and thrashes like a diseased cat. Without taking her shotgun or her 1,000-yard stare off the crowd, she kneels, her black tactical gear making her look like a formless, indomitable mountain. She slams the ghast into the ground, over and over, not showing a sign of strain as she lifts the 100-kilo beast with one hand. Normally, one needs blessed salt, a ritual knife, and a dead man's ash to hurt one of these things. Tammy simply smashed it against the ground, like a bag of ice, till it tore apart. She stands, still holding a fistful of dripping green flesh in her left hand. She looks no more concerned than if she was addressing a room full of grade schoolers. Norm gets to talk to the really weird stuff. Takes one to know one, and all that. But Tammy is our negotiator when it comes to the more intellectually inclined entities. She has that Ash Williams, Reggie Bannister confidence neither Norm nor myself cared to cultivate.
This can be a bloodbath if everyone wants it to be, but you bunch of scraps and rejected stories are outmatched, and you all know it. You know who we want, and we're not asking you to help us get her, but I highly suggest staying out of our way.
As Tammy says this, she takes a few steps forward. The closest entities actually back up. A couple new kids decide to take her up on her offer. 2 20-something, twitchy, human-looking things with bleached, burned skin and hunting knives seemingly fused to their right hands. They make it as far as the doorway when a shimmering field of gray light bisects them, one half falling outside of the building, one flopping limply inside, before being tossed in a spinning arc as the doors slam shut.
And what do we have here?
That voice, that upbeat, overconfident, somehow sinister voice. I turned to see her, the child of Hamlin, coming out of a back room, the entities filling this place parting around her. I'm sure the Moses imagery is purposeful on her part. She stands 5'7", tanned skin, but beyond that I couldn't guess where she's from. Besides the obvious, it's like her features suggest what I want to see rather than what's actually there. She's wearing a suit again, but this time it's festive, cheerful, a wacky combination of primary colors that gives her the look of walking cartoon character, albeit one that is most certainly in charge. Her hair is shoulder length, a vibrant red-orange that shifts color from one moment to the next, like an undersea creature. I finally take in the space around me. To my left are rows and rows of arcade games, flanked by mirrored walls. Some I recognize, others seem to be custom-made for Pretsu, featuring the same characters plastered over every available space. To my right is a massive indoor jungle gym. Tube slides, ball pits, and any other childhood staple stretches as far as the eye can see. In front of us, flanking the door to the Child of Hamlin, came through our various food vendors, all staffed by entities wearing similar uniforms, each themed after a different animal, the costume covering their more obvious paranormal features. And those staff, they weren't the rabble we were about to eviscerate. No, I recognize each one, a legend in their own right. It speaks volumes for the woman pulling the strings.
And what do we have here? Is this a group of hunters? How goddamn cute! You've got to tell me the plan. Name's Lisa, by the way. Awesome to meet you,
she says, walking forward, no fear, just a sense of aloof amusement on her face.
We keep you and the freak squad busy until...
I'm cut off. One moment she was standing maybe 10 feet away from me. Next, she is nose to nose with Tammy. Tammy doesn't waste a second throwing a lightning-quick overhand punch that I've seen break skulls and cave in the ribs of anything that goes bump in the night. What I've never seen is something take it without blinking, nor Tammy pulling her hand back. A twisted, bloody mess, torn up far worse than she could have done by her own force alone. She screams, and I feel a cold pit start to form in my stomach. I look to the backpack. It holds all of our heavy equipment. I catch Lisa's eye and she smiles, flicking her wrist delicately, mockingly. The massive, armored tactical bag sails through the air, shrinking as it goes, eventually disappearing entirely with a small popping noise. Tammy is trying to hide her pain, but no one keeps a stoic expression with one hand looking like a shredded steak. She's bleeding out, fast. My mind scrambles for an escape plan.
Please, just keep being the most dramatic person ever,
Lisa says, dripping disdain. She grabs Tammy's hand, and with a sound like melting ice, the compound fractures sink below the skin. The wounds seal. It's still broken, likely needs to be amputated, but no longer life-threatening at least.
Now, can I fucking talk, or do I need to kill one of you right off the bat to get your attention?
Lisa clears her throat. Suddenly, her voice is booming over the loudspeakers, addressing the entire room.
Now, on one hand, I see a business full of monsters that couldn't find the courage to attack 3 humans. And on the other hand, 3 humans too stupid to do a little research beyond bluntly pirating a couple videos of mine. All of you failures should be ashamed of yourselves. But I'm bored. So I'll give everyone a chance to stop sucking. Isn't that great? Sun's up in 5 hours. Any one of you sewer-dwelling new blood rodents who brings me one of the hunters, you and your friend get a job. That's the job of your dreams, and one hell of a favor from whoever you gift the job to. You hunters, you survive. You get to walk out of here, regroup, and come back with a better plan. To make things interesting, the staff will be prowling around, being neutral. I suggest all of you to avoid them. They are as bored as I am, just not as creative. Oh, and Tamara? Because you thought you could put your hands on me, I'm dropping in a handful of civilians.
We were all in shock. We expected power, but this, we couldn't have expected this. This isn't legend or myth. This is a bullshit tall tale told after drinking Sterno that I'm somehow actually living through. She starts to walk back, slowly, laughing to herself as if we were nothing more than children.
You have 30 minutes before the game starts. I wouldn't suggest trying anything to each other before that.
Is the last thing Lisa says before the lights dim, and an upbeat theme song begins to play over the loudspeakers. Entities scatter, staff move like sharks, scanning, picking out the weakest, a good portion not moving their steel gaze from us.
I like her,
Norm says in his space cadet tone.
Shut the hell up, Norm.
Tammy replies.
Just saying, she's got style.
Norm starts looking around. I want to shake him out of it, but I know he's working, in his own way.
That way.
He says, pointing to one of the mirrored walls of the arcade. Norm might be out in left field, but I've had to trust him with my life since I was a kid. We sprint toward the wall. Tammy and myself stop dead. Norm, though, just keeps walking straight through one of the mirror panels. We follow, finding ourselves in a room the size of a football stadium. Arcade games, some 20 to 30 feet high, create a maze of blind passages, flashing lights, and random, deafening electronic noises. What I don't see is any entities following us in. Chalk another one up for Norm. We walk deep into the maze, memorizing the twists and turns, hoping to get an advantage on whatever raging thing first comes after us. Our inventory is thin. My MAC-10, the shotgun, a handful of rounds and shells, a couple knives, and an emergency first aid kit. Norm has a couple of trinkets on him, but neither me nor Tammy have any idea what use they may or may not have. What's the plan, Tammy? I ask, looking at my watch. 5 minutes till things start in earnest.
We bunker down here till we get hit. Once shit gets too thick, we fall back to that playground. Then we hope Norm can tell us if there are any nasty surprises in there. You getting anything friendly right now, Norm?
Tammy has collected herself. She's all business, even with her injury.
Too many voices to hear anything clearly right now. Everything here is so interesting.
Norm is smiling, the exact opposite, loving every second around hundreds of paranormally charged objects. And how do we deal with the civilians? I ask, knowing someone has to broach the question.
One of those rotters gets a hold of them? We've got that many new things to deal with.
Tammy's tone is flat. But I know her. She never likes going scorched earth.
You guys understand this is probably our last fight, right?
Norm says, out of the blue. The seconds of silence feel like hours. He's not wrong, though. Might as well go out trying to help. Is that what you, of all people, are getting at? I say to Norm, shaking my head. He smiles at me, almost as if to say, am I wrong, though? He wasn't. The twisted contest starts. Lights turning harsh, music shutting off, leaving only the tuneless noise of the arcade machines. And the screams. I can tell they are human. Not what I wanted to have to deal with right off the bat. I'm no scumbag. We do what we do to save people from having their lives cut short by pure evil. But some part of me was hoping the civilian issue would sort itself out before we had to get involved. Tammy was already following me. Norm is jiggling joysticks, pressing random buttons and shaking misshapen machines. She grabs him by the shoulder, forcing him to keep up.
Something is following us,
Tammy says after a couple minutes of walking toward the sound of people.
It smells dry. Keep your head on a swivel.
We stop at a blind corner, spotting the group. As much as we live for this hero shit, an ambush is likely. 8 adults, no pattern I can see. We have a couple in their 60s, in their Sunday best. He wears a brown suit that's old but well kept up. She wears one of those fuzzy-looking sweaters people always swear are expensive, and a pair of green pants. 4 guys in their mid-20s, bit of an edge to their look, but clean-shaven and well-groomed. They obviously know each other. Friends, bandmates maybe. I notice one guy, a tall white dude, nervously spinning a guitar pick. One guy stands naked, looking more confused than the rest. His hair is wild and he keeps pinching himself. I quickly realize he thinks he's sleeping. Finally, a small girl, no more than 6 years old. She cries, sitting on the ground, her face buried in the crook of her arm. The group is arguing, throwing accusations, making theories. We easily walk up to them unnoticed. The guy with the guitar pick throws a punch. Thankfully for him, I'm more merciful than the demon running this place. His fist connects with my chin. I nod to him, like I'm acquiescing a point. He backs up. I stop, putting up my hands. Totally ruining this peaceful gesture is Tammy holding her shotgun at waist level, trained on the crowd. That one is for free. I'm sure you guys are scared. The next one, though, that costs you. No questions, no debate. We are the good guys. Anything else is slow death. I say. Tammy is good with spooky shit. I'm better with people.
And how do we know we can trust you?
The old man says, protectively standing in front of what I assume is his wife. Guess I'm not as good with people as I thought.
Victor, in about 3 seconds, something is coming out of that machine to your right.
Norm says, so casually, I almost didn't register it. I back up, watching as the flashing blue light from within the cabinet dimmed, then died. I see a massive yellowed skull, empty eye sockets and haphazardly filled teeth push out of the arcade cabinet. An 8-fingered skeletal hand is next, crawling, almost spider-like from the machine. We call them house warmers, older than the Bible and full of tricks beyond their massive bone frames. Once upon a time, some sick bastards made 23 of them. Maybe 6 are left roaming the world today, but that's plenty. They can travel through any kind of cabinet, box, or doorway. Their favorite hunting grounds are newly occupied homes or businesses. But in a pinch, they are not picky hunters. The crowd panics, staring sheep-like at the 10-foot, chattering creature. It hesitates for a moment, trying to decide if we are a threat. It grabs the old man in a flash, seeing us as nothing but more time-consuming prey. It pulls the old man apart, blood and gore hitting the ground in a torrent. A horrible inhaling noise comes from somewhere within the creature's chest. I wish I didn't know that was the thing stopping the man's essence from moving on. It pays for that, though. Tammy tosses her gun to Norm and draws a hurlbat, an ancient Germanic weapon. It's nothing more than a large sharpened rectangle of steel, but the one she carries strapped to one leg has been tasting the blood of demons and cultists since bronze was new. The housewarmer's jaw explodes into fist-sized chunks, the bone around it beginning to crumble and rot. It leaps at Tammy, hands outstretched. Norm and I step to the side. It's faster than it has any right to be. Tammy is wrapped in both massive bone claws in a blink. But that armor she wears isn't just for show. One thing you learned real quick in our line of work is that even the biggest person is a jello-filled sack to an entity of sufficient size. It kneels, shaking her like a murderous parent, as veins of rot and cracks begin to creep down its shoulders.
Anytime here, guys.
Tammy yells. Norm and I fire in unison. The house warmer is suddenly a double amputee, Tammy dropping like a brick, but still landing on her feet. She breaks one claw from the hand, clocking it back like a javelin. The creature backs up, suddenly blind as its eye sockets start to dissolve. The sharpened bone spike pierces the skeleton's ribcage, and with a scream that I can feel, the thing falls apart. On the move, now, I tell the shocked crowd. A demand and a warning all at once. Over the next half hour, we move at half speed, hearing more and more entities come in and begin searching for our unlucky little group. For their part, the civilians remain quiet, probably too shocked to do anything stupid. Abominations that cross the line between thing and animal are universally silent. Their forms may be asymmetrical, weeping pus and blood covered in scabs and clawed limbs, but they could be walking on a light bulb-strewn floor covered in pop rocks and you'll never hear them coming. The first stands at one end of a long corridor of machines. It's a lanky thing, looking like a furless bipedal coyote. It grins, skinless lips weeping thin blood. The second blocks us in from the opposite direction. This one is a massive quadrupedal fusion of man and boar, easily as tall as Tammy. Blunt molar-tipped tusks jut from its jowl-laden face. The rest, in their motley forms, stare at us from the tops of the cabinets. This type of situation is exactly why we carry around the backpack. Without it, it feels like suddenly finding oneself in a pitcher plant,
What's the percentage?
Norm asks. It's code. He's telling me he has a way out of the situation. He's also telling me it's high cost. And finally, he's asking me how many civilians drop before a plan like that becomes viable. I look around. The last of the crew where things died out back in the 50s, and as I scan the group of runts and rejects hovering over us, I don't see any close cousins. About 50, less if that bore is worse than it looks, I reply. I couldn't describe the brutal scrum blow by blow if I tried. The things on the machines leapt down, blood flew. Trapped in that close, no one laid down and died though. Nowhere to run makes people a lot braver than they think. Tammy wreaked havoc, every edge of her body a weapon. She severed limbs and crushed skulls faster than the things could grow them back. Norm seemed to know when everything was going to happen moments before it did, pushing civilians to safety, dodging sure death, all while staring intently at the flashing games most of the time. Me, I took my shots when I could. I shouted out targets when I got a flash of insight, and as a long yellow claw burrowed into my left eye, I wished for the millionth time my own blessings didn't get muted all those years ago. 2 of the band members die. They managed to grapple the coyote thing, drag it to the ground, and snap its neck. They couldn't hear me telling them to keep going over the din of the battle. The 2 men only knew they were dying when they saw the tiny, almost delicate fist burst through their chest. Mercifully, the old woman didn't see it coming at all. A backhanded blow that sent Tammy crashing into the wall of arcade machines took her head from her body before she knew what happened. I didn't see the naked man die, only saw his body after the fact. Whatever happened to him was the work of a handful of creatures. When Norm saw me clutching my eye, the creature that did it dying of a couple dozen glowing red bullet wounds, he gave me a look that let me know he was doing his thing. He closes his eyes for a moment. I fend off claws and snapping fangs, having no clue what he's pulling off, but knowing he needs time to do it. He whispers something I have no hope of hearing, and nods solemnly. With a wave of breaking glass, neon blue hands spring forth from the machines, grasping the bestial things assaulting us. Their touch seems to wrap the creatures, their flesh seeming to become unstable. They claw and trash, bite and curse, but the thing's hands slowly drag each one into the humming arcade machines. Unlike the housewarmer, though, their progress is brutal, shaving off flesh, breaking bone, and causing the tortured screams of creatures thought incapable of true pain. The corridor, toppled machines, blinking lights, shattered glass, is silent. 4 civilians, 3 hunters, bloodied, beaten, but alive. One machine, still standing, starts to open down the middle, creating a doorway of blue light. I try to look within, but get a blinding headache. Norm begins to walk toward it.
Jesus, Norm, what did you do?
Tammy says, stepping in front of him.
I made a deal, Tammy. I said it earlier. This isn't the time to hold out. I did what I had to do to save us.
Norm says, more lucidly than I've seen him in a long time.
Fuck them! Who cares if you made a deal?
The one look I got at the doorway lets me know exactly why Norm cares if it breaks this deal. Not everything powerful is old. What is in these machines has a deep current of power, and a mind young enough to be petty with it. She doesn't try stopping him. Not really. It's just instinct to rage against war's price. Norm looks to me for a moment before he steps into that abyss.
I'm sorry about what happened to you, Vic. I should have seen it coming. It was my job.
He says. Before I can reply, he walks into the doorway. It slams shut like a gallows door, doing God knows what to my kid brother.
Looks like the score is 1-0 Hunters. 2 more strikes and you're out.
That bitch's voice says over the loudspeakers.
But this is a game you were always going to lose, ever since you first stumbled onto my existence. I stopped having to worry about your kind when I was still hunting down my siblings. When I made the choice to stop being a monster and start being a goddamned legend. But even then, that wasn't enough. Legends do die, legends fade. I learned to take strength from blood and flesh, soul and emotion. But true power, it doesn't come from the cattle you call brother. It comes from the Voidborn. So I fought, I learned, I begged, and I prostrated myself before old gods and new powers. I then became an eater of legends. I learned to change, to adapt, to take and use and turn every bit of the world to my advantage. But I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm not done yet. I've had my fill of legends. I'm on my way to consume the divine. You think you can get in my way? I'm an unstoppable fucking force, Victor. You are a pretentious Elmer Fudd.
Static squealing ends the taunt. The scary thing is, she isn't lying. I'd know if she was. 2 hours in and the maze is a running battle. The staff, bored, or unleashed, wade into groups of entities. No half-breed, no-name beasts here, no dirt common dregs, just beings that bring to mind Jack the Ripper, Bloody Mary, gleefully ending the lives of their lesser ilk. We lose the naked man on the trek back to the tube slides and ball pits. Something dressed in a plague doctor coat and wearing a cheap badger-themed half-mask spewed a caustic substance at the man. We ran. Not quick enough to avoid hearing the noise of the creature consuming the flesh paste the man was rapidly turning into, though. Without Norm, we enter the playground blind. For all we know, it could eat people and shit cyanide, but sooner or later, if we stay out in the open, something is going to decide we are a better prize than a few monster pelts. The plastic tunnels are cramped and smell of piss. Tammy and I are at the front, the little girl behind us, and the remaining 2 band members bringing up the rear. Every noise from outside, every thump of a body hitting the structure stops us dead. Civilian, hunter, child, we are all simply caught up in this carnal house. There are no heroes anymore. We come to a large rectangular room, tall enough to at least sit in comfortably. One bubble plastic window looking out on the carnage below. "You guys are monster hunters?" One of the men, an Indian guy with a lip ring and short green hair, says. I laugh. Not at the moment. Right now, you and that right cross that did nothing to that cat thing are as much of a demon slayer as I am. I finish my sentence by ripping off a piece of his shirt and packing my freely dripping eye socket. The girl is crying again, face buried in her arm. The other man, a pot-bellied guy with a faux hawk, puts an arm around her. An hour passes. So far, so good. The staff have taken to crediting effigies and totems of the corpses of the other entities.
I'm hungry,
the girl says, her tiny voice echoing through the empty tubes and cheap plastic. I had 2 seconds to save the faux hawk's guy's life. Not being able to stand, let alone get any kind of leverage, makes this impossible. She looks at me, and I see it. The deep black orbs for eyes, the pointed teeth, the sudden blurring of her form. She wrenches the man's arm from its socket, smashing it into my face. Tammy tries to scramble over, but part of her tactical suit gets caught in a plastic seam. The guy is in too much shock to fight back. He stares at his spurting shoulder in disbelief. Those piranha-like teeth tear open the man's throat next. The spray coated the inside of the tiny room. The floor is a pool of hot blood. I slip, landing flat, as she leaps upon the second man. The MAC-10 ran out of ammo back in the arcade. I fire 5 shots from the backup revolver into the dead-eyed child. Might as well have been throwing snowballs. Tammy is wrenching at the plastic, but the steel hook won't budge. The dark-skinned man holds the child as far as he can, but inch by inch she wears him down. One of his wrists break, her tiny hands crushing it like a paper straw. Fuck, I say, aiming at the plastic bubble and firing my last shot. A dinner plate-sized hole blows out of it, large cracks forming over the rest of its surface. I hope it's enough. I get to my knees and throw myself at the child. She turns like a viper, grabbing me by the collar. Exactly what I wanted. Guess the universe can't be a bastard 24 hours a day, can it? I grab her forearms, and within an awkward twisting lurch that tears half the muscles in my back, I throw us both out of the window. Plastic gives, but not before tearing long gouges in both of us. We fall somewhere around 15 feet, but I'm ready. I hit the ground, breaking one wrist, but landing on the black-eyed kid. The blunt trauma pulps its insides, and those eyes go from deep black to a dead, lifeless gray. I stand, my left knee loose and wobbling. I see staff and lesser entities look at me from every angle, stopping their fighting to see this new development. They begin to close ranks, surrounding me. I reach in a pocket and pull out a switchblade that used to be owned by James Dean. He was one of us, and he sure as hell didn't get killed by a sharp turn. I've got one good hand, one good leg, and one good eye. With a massive crash beside me, I have one good soldier to back me up. I hear a shell rack into the scattergun from up in the equipment, and I hope we have one good marksman. I look around the room, and as I do, I get the largest flash in a decade. A psychic shock so massive, so powerful, and so detailed it seems to slow down time. Almost all of the entities left are new blood. Entity types that have only sprung up in the past few decades, and even then, it's the runts, the kids, the old, or the frail. They were not stalking the weak. The staff, her minions, were taking the choicest cuts. This wasn't a trap for us. This was something so much more. This was something enacting a plan decades in the making. This is a ritual, a rite, a way to make all of this slaughter more than even the sum of its parts. I can't comprehend the complexity. Rituals to me are some corpse ash and sulfur, this weaving of ethereal powers. This is the work of a demigod. They come on in droves, the runts, the crippled, the things that are left. The staff stand back. This dark performance already too far gone to stop. Tammy wades through them. In a fair universe, she'd have been allowed to kill these things one by one and walk out without a scratch. But the universe isn't fair, and each glancing blow, each ghostly hand passing through her, wore her down a little more, spilled a little more blood that was in short supply. I did my best to help. The knife practically had a mind of its own, but my collarbone is cracked, my gait is uneven, and my remaining eye is starting to lose focus from lack of blood. Our last charge dies with a gurgling scream, something finally having the brains to crawl into the rank playground after him. Tammy tosses off her torn and useless tactical vest, down to a loose-fitting green shirt and a set of brass knuckle dusters. There's about a half dozen things left, all looking as torn up as we are, but Tammy never gets the chance to save the day. Tammy drops the black knuckles. She's held fast. I hear a psychic hum as Lisa walks over, the very air thick with dark potential. I'm not describing what the thing did to my sister, other than to say she did it without lifting a finger, and it left her a twisted, screaming wreck. She broke her body and her mind, flaying both while she spoke to me.
Saw everything just that second too late, Vic? You are lucky, though, because you came along right about as I need a message delivered,
she says, handing me 2 pictures. One, a pretty but severe-looking woman in her 30s. Lots of tattoos, short hair. The other, it takes me a moment to realize is the same woman, but rotten, twisted, covered in almost alive-looking tattoos.
You find things. Go find her. She has something that belongs to me, but she is a little difficult to contact. That is, lesson learned on your part. Don't feel too bad, sweetie. Mike Tyson can't knock out a hurricane. You go patch yourself up. Go be Mike Tyson again. Stop worrying about the weather.
She grins and turns to a massive patchwork staff member. Its elephant headgear makes what happens next all the more surreal and soul-crushing.
Bring that mess on the floor back to the lab. I think I might have a use for it.
I turn and leave, knowing I have no choice but to do as Lisa asked, trying to drown out the sounds of Tammy being dragged away for God knows what. The problem with having idols is that they're never what we want, even if they are what we think. And in that sense, I'd like to apologize to a lot of you. I know people want me walking the noble path, to take this curse I've been given and forge it into a sword of righteous wrath, to defend the weak and push back the darkness. And if the dice fell a different way in my life, maybe I would. But as it stands, I'm not in a place where ideals are a benefit. No, the path that I'm walking down is dark, broken, dangerous, and full of uncomfortable twists and turns. If I'm not willing to follow where it leads, I'm dead, and likely much worse. So for all of you that want me to be a superhero by another name, stop listening. Pretend I lived my days stopping muggers in alleyways and making friends with folks on the fringes of society. Because what I did, what I'm willing to do, is nothing like that. When Demi said there was dark experimentation ahead of me, he, if anything, understated the fact. At first, the God Eater was hot on our heels. We'd skip from city to city trying to find the time and the materials to see what makes me tick. Ritual sacrifice here, double amputation there. You know, typical stuff. But it began to drag behind. Demi had theories, but we didn't bother looking a gift horse in the mouth. More time meant more chances to knock complicated experiments off the list. And what a list it was. It wasn't too long before I developed a reputation. If you knew how to look, of course. In Battle Creek, Michigan, they blamed the slangs on a serial killer in the newspapers and dogmen on deep web forums. In Columbus, Ohio, teenagers began to speak of the ghost of a homeless woman who left no traces besides strange symbols left in old blood. 4 farmers abandoned their fields near Windsor, Ontario. They didn't make a fuss, took the loss in stride. But when halfway through a case of beer, every one would be perfectly willing to tell you of the times they saw a lone scarecrow walking their fields, talking the things that they couldn't see. No idea where these people got their descriptions from, by the way. Guess the human mind fills in the blanks when scared shitless and facing likely death. What do I look like now? Whatever I please. One of the many little tools I've picked up on my journey to damn myself. But when I look in a mirror, what I see is a horror of bone and muscle, eyes suspended in hollow sockets, floating of their own accord. Entire pieces of my arms and legs are missing, black, tarry sinews connecting them. I keep myself in layers of clothing, protecting the world from my constant toxic weep.
What the hell is that?
I asked Demi. We stand on the second floor of an abandoned jail, a place that lately I've come to call my home. Demi has a long and involved explanation as to why he wants us haunting this pit of asbestos and vermin. But like most things involving him, I take it on faith in one hand and prepare for betrayal in the other.
This?
Demi says. The object he is holding is 2 orbs, fused in the middle. One pitch black, one spotless white. Even in the dust and grime of the prison.
This is the reason I decided to lend a hand on your little sojourn, instead of grabbing some popcorn and watching from the sidelines.
I've learned it's better not to take the bait with Demi. I let silence impregnate the room. Eventually, he continues.
One side are the lives you have saved, the other are the lives you have taken. The first number never increases unless it was selfish and you had something to lose. The second, not unless the life you took was not yours to take.
He spins the trinket through his fingers as he speaks. According to who? I ask. Demi shrugs.
That is the question now, isn't it? I've seen monsters, legends, demigods, and things that play at being divine, but I've never given much thought to what would be beyond that. But this unassuming little bauble is more powerful than anything I've owned. Its magic comes from a well so deep even I haven't been curious enough to explore it. Maybe it was made by some magi or entity that was lost to time. If not though, well, maybe it would be good to try and even out those numbers a little bit before someone else takes a bigger rock to my skull.
He chuckles a bit as if he's trying to convince himself with this monologue just as much as he's trying to convince me. Demi, you have a conscience? I laugh, the hollow noise echoing through the jail.
After a fashion. My sins are in great enough quantity that stopping something that would destroy the world, given the chance, may be the only way to balance them out. If I'd not came across what may be the world's most unlucky woman, I'd have likely just continued my own path and dealt with the consequences when the time came.
His tone is matter-of-fact. I start to judge, but remember how the last year of my life has been spent. I hear the sound of the door being forced open. But beyond that, I feel the people enter the jail. The longer we stay, the more of a connection to this place I feel. 5 people coming in to film some shit, I say, exasperated. Make no mistake, I don't take joy in hurting people. What I do for revenge. Or, if I'm being charitable to myself, to stop something from devouring this world and the next. Demi pulls out a large book bound with pulsating human skin. He begins to flip through the seemingly infinite pages, looking for ways to make the most out of the unfortunate group who wandered into our domain. Is there anything PG-13 in there, Demi? I'm not mentally up for any dirty work tonight. That construction crew in Jolet, I swear I've been seeing them in the shadows. I ask. Demi rolls his eyes.
The unlucky woman defies her nickname. Have we not seen what happens if you overwhelm someone's senses with fear?
He says, one long, ragged nail holding down a crumbling yellow page. As much as this seems like the perfect response to my request, there is a good reason I haven't knocked this item off of the shit list. Scaring someone into a faint is surprisingly hard. Make someone run is easy. Overwhelm someone's senses so hard with fear and torture that they stroke out and die? Also easy. But that middle ground, where the mind shuts itself down without committing neural harikiri, that's threading a needle. Casualties are better than victims, I guess, I say, stretching out. Which is unnecessary. Whatever keeps my limbs moving sure as hell isn't flesh and bone. But habits are hard to break. Demi moves to the shadows, watching the situation play out. My bare feet make no noise as I walk down the pitch-black halls and stairwells. Black gel like ink leaving coal-colored footprints behind me. I'm seeing things in the cells. This always happens when I have to start tapping into the shit keeping me up and moving. I don't know if they're really there or not, and until they become a real issue, I don't plan on telling Demi. I can't turn into shadow like Demi, but I don't need to. I know every blind turn, every place the flickering light bulbs don't quite reach. I'm waiting for the group from 12 feet away, and they are none the wiser. I barely see the rest. I'm finding the leader, the one I need to break. Every group has one. It's not always the biggest, the meanest, or the smartest. There's some intangible trait I'm looking for, or rather, smelling. I could do it silently. I chose not to. They look around, the crumbling building making the sound impossible to trace. I found him. He's around 20, Latino with a headlamp. In a look that tells me he already understands something is wrong. The man cracks a glow stick, tossing it in my direction, but well past me. The group walks by. My target is random, the last in line. A man of about 40, balding, and with a faded X-Files t-shirt. In a blur, I take the man, one hand around his mouth, the other around his waist. One of the few tangible benefits I've gotten recently is being able to not kill anyone I touch. With enough concentration, anyway. He sits on the floor of a cell. I'm kneeling, meeting his gaze, staring daggers into him. He looks me up and down, again and again, not able to believe what he's seeing. I put a finger up to my shredded lips. My command is understood, and the man stops struggling. We wait a few minutes till we hear a mumbled, frantic conversation from the far end of a cell block. "I want to hear you scream," I whisper, breaking the man's pinky finger with a rotten wood snap. The man is a goddamn tank, or too scared to understand a simple request. He curses, tears coming from his eyes, but no scream. I slap him, ragged nails leaving shallow cuts across his face. "I'm not being figurative. You scream well, I stop having to make you scream." He finally clues in and begins to wail. I grab the finger and twist it for good measure. His pitch raises to voice-cracking levels. I'm out of the cell long before the rest of the group arrives. As expected, the wounded man is confused, rambling. As always, they make a break for the door. As required, Demi has long since made sure the door isn't going to budge. The pistol cocks. I start to walk slowly, loudly, toward the group. They don't scatter. They hold their ground, watching me walk toward them, arms outstretched. A dozen flashes of light, a dozen bullets pass harmingly through me, blowing chunks out of the concrete behind my shrunken, leathery form. I can feel the fear relaxing myself. I feel the tendrils of cursed ink spring forth from the missing pieces of my body, fanning like peacock feathers, preparing to strike like scorpion tails. I let a phlegmatic, rattling noise escape me. It echoes and multiplies, distorting itself, becoming louder and softer. It's a sentient noise. Not much it can actually do to hurt anyone, but it doesn't need to. The cacophony and the monster in front of them is visibly wearing them down. The leader sees this and picks up a piece of rebar from the ground. Reminds me a little of myself once upon a time. He charges towards me. I expect nothing else. Just as he swings with the pipe, two of the tendrils yank me up into the ceiling in a black blur. But not before taking a little something. I drop the man's ear among the group as I drag myself through the cracks back to the second floor, leaving them to drink in their situation.
That's your definition of PG-13, is it?
Demi taunts me.
Not that I disapprove, but the ear may have been a bit much.
That guy's not breaking without losing a few pieces. He'll thank me when he has PTSD instead of a tombstone. Demi and I discuss how to proceed. Demi may make my crimes look like shoplifting, but I don't have a very creative mind in regards to this kind of stuff. I take no enjoyment in the fear or the blood. They are tools, not toys. But Demi has an honest love for screwing with people, bordering on the obsessive. Comes in handy, to say the least. If you think that'll do the job, I'll give it a try, but honestly, if worse comes to worse... I began, but I'm cut off by a gunshot. Not the tiny pop from the pawnshop pistol from before, but a thundering explosion followed by a quarter-sized hole in my chest that is ringed by burning gray embers. The wound burns. I haven't felt pain in months, not since I stood ankle-deep in the blood of 13 thieves. But I scream. A too real, too human noise to be coming from my dime store comic form. I grab the wound, turning around to see the strangest thing. A man, late 30s, but scarred, torn up to look well beyond his years. He's about 5'9", missing an eye, the flesh around it pale and lifeless. In one hand, he has an old steel cane. I can practically feel the power radiating from it. And the other, he holds a large pistol covered in script and runes I recognize. He wears a thick leather jacket, obviously designed for function instead of style. The chains and buckles making it look more like medieval armor than modern fashion. The guy didn't exactly cut an intimidating figure, but the animal laying beside him, half asleep, confused me further. It was some kind of basset hound, an ancient, giant, crippled thing, all gray fur and loose, flopping skin. So much so, I wondered how in the hell the saggy, yellow-eyed canine got around without tripping over itself. I got the feeling this guy was here with ill intent, but the two of them looked much more Hanna-Barbera than Sam Raimi. I don't feel shaken, despite the burning pain in my chest. "Who the hell are you?" I say, stepping forward aggressively. As if he didn't come in packing a handful of disabilities and a dying dog, the man smiles before replying. "I'm the guy who was told to find you and pass on a message. But the way I see it, if that bitch wants something from you, my best move is to put you 6 feet under." Demi puts a hand on my shoulder, stopping me from getting closer.
"And what of the tube-shaped monstrosity you brought?"
Demi says, never one to pass up a good speech. "Johnny here. Oh, I got him by cashing in every favor I've accumulated in my sad little life. Figured if you were Lisa's friend, wasn't a point in taking chances. Heard of Cerberus? Well, I don't know if I believe all that religious shit attached, but I've met plenty of monster dogs. Things with the soul of a man's best friend, but born in the depths of the void. Johnny here, he's the exact opposite of that. One of the last 6 left on Earth, actually." The man holsters his gun. I see him pull something out of his jacket.
"And you expect that to even the odds with him, do you?"
Demi goads the man. "No, I'm not the man I once was." The man shows what he's holding. It looks similar to a flashbang grenade, but I've found ways to relive the past. Name's Vic, by the way. The man lobs the grenade underhand, slowly. It ignites as it spins through the air, spraying sparkling white fog in a massive plume. The dog starts to stand, agonizingly slowly. As it does, it starts to get longer, wider, taller. His eyes lose that dead sheen and turn a vibrant blue, the intellect behind them obvious and ancient. It fills out every inch of the folds of its skin, going from an 80-kilo morbidly obese dog on the verge of death to a massive horse-sized creature that wolves could only wish to be. I start to feel lightheaded and turn to Demi. What I see is a man in his mid-50s wearing Demi's clothing. Not the pale, unstoppable corpse I've come to know, but a regular, fragile-looking human.
"We need to run, now,"
Demi says. We bolt down a hallway. My skin burns, my head aches. I see globs of ink slowing off of me, flaking to nothing before they hit the ground. The fog rolls in like it has a mind of its own. We keep steps ahead of it, Demi already starting to pant and tire. "What's going on?" I say, dragging Demi into an old security office. I peel layers of clothing off, stuffing them in the doorframe, hoping to block the burning, disorienting mist. Demi sits in a mold-ridden old chair, unable to speak. After long, agonizing seconds, he tells me what he knows.
"The little bastard knows his trinkets,"
Demi says with a cough.
"That fog takes things that used to be human and brings them back to that state for a time."
Demi wipes blood from the corners of his mouth. He doesn't need to tell me how dire the situation is. Sure, letting this withered old psychopath bleed out would likely be a net benefit for the world. But without him, his book, and his seemingly endless supply of cursed object, I'd have to navigate the world of creatures, packs, and dark rituals myself.
"But so do I,"
Demi says, fiddling with a vial inside his jacket. He draws a long, thin knife, places the tip of his pinky on the rusted steel blade, and slices it off. He applies a black powder to the spurting stump. With a sizzling noise and a smell that I honestly can't describe, the wound seals. He pours the vial over the piece of flesh and bone. It begins to rot, then spread a thick, black and green mold over the table.
"We need to throw them off their game. You go after the film crew. See if you can get him away from his beast. His type can't resist the urge to play hero. I'll keep them busy as long as I can. I terrorized London with nothing more than my hands and my wits. I'm more than capable of haranguing a boy and his dog with the same."
Demi stands, adjusting some of his trinkets.
"I'll get things started."
Somehow, that grin of his looks worse on a human face. The mold is covering the walls and the ceiling now, pulsating, sprouting sick, diseased-looking fronds and mushrooms. When Demi opens the door, tendrils seem to race each other to cover every inch of the prison in foul, grasping vegetation. He stands in the hallway, walking casually through the fog, inspecting the alien plants as if he was in a conservatory instead of a fight for his life. I creep through the hallways, listening for any sign of this demon slayer or his beast. I can feel the film crew heading upstairs. I don't feel the cane until it hits my stomach. It wasn't swung fast. It wasn't a heavy object. But I flew into the wall by the stairwell like I was hit by a truck. I struggle to get to my feet, the fog and the blow making the world swim and wobble. You hear the term monster hunter and you picture an underdog, some regular Joe who got on the bad side of something like myself and decided to pick up a chainsaw and fight back. You picture that because you're not a monster. What stalks toward me sets off a fear so deep within me. To call it primal would be to affront whatever set the universe in motion. I feel scared. I feel hunted. I'm staring at something that's whole reason to have been born is to kill me. So, what is it you have of her, Alex? You store the baby hearts or kitten souls, emergency supply of virgin blood. Has to be pretty goddamned important if she has you and Charlie Chaplin back there guarding it. I know he doesn't tend to come cheap. Victor punctuates his sentence by lightly tapping me with the cane. My right arm bursts into pain. I hit the ground. Off in the distance, I hear the sounds of growling and metal tearing. Fuck me, do you have it wrong, Vic? What does she have me guarding? She turned me into a walking corpse. She made me carry a plague, then set me loose on everyone close to me, fucked up as they were. I'd let you take my head from my shoulders here and now. I don't want this. But if I did that, I wouldn't get the satisfaction of crushing her bird neck under my heel. All of you know how much I hate speeches, but I needed to buy myself a little bit of time. This guy seems to have a good heart, but I'm not willing to trust him. There's too much at stake. As the film crew rounds the corner, I sprint past Vic, catching him off guard. I narrowly avoid the cane, which sparks as it clings off the wall. I know I don't have much time. My arm shakes and trembles as I lift one of the film crew by their neck, holding them between myself and Victor. If we can just calm the hell down, I think we can have... The body tears open in the middle. A torrent of blood and gore as the man's legs hit the ground. At first, I assumed Victor was just callous, shooting through the man. But as I drop the rest of the body, I see the shocked, venomous look on his face. He draws and raises his pistol in an instant, firing as he advances. I turn and run, hoping Demi is having a better time than myself. The film crew scatter. A bullet zips through my stomach. I find myself coughing, the fluid coming up. Not the gray ichor or black ink I've become used to, but a thin, red blood. Demi is backing away from the dog thing, the canine creature's body taking up the entire walkway on the second tier of cells. Vines and gnashing maws grab the thing, but it tears through them like light scrub. Demi pulls something from his coat. It glows with a black light. The dog knocks it out of his hand with one massive paw, almost sending Demi over the edge of the railing in the process. I run to Demi, so much slower now. I see raw red patches of skin and bone replacing the missing pieces of myself. They burn and itch, but I put it out of my mind. I grab the old man by the collar and throw him, ass over tea kettle, into one of the cells. Two jaws snap shut just in front of me, close enough to drench me in the beast's drool. I toss myself into the cell, slamming the rusted gate shut with flagging strength. Likely the thing would be able to rip the bars out of the wall with ease. But it has no leverage. The bars bend and warp as it tries to break through, but they hold for the moment. I slump against the wall, trying to catch my breath. Something I thought would never be an issue again. I see Demi, and even discounting the battle scars. He's looking bad. Dark circles around his eyes, blood dripping from a corner in his mouth, and a hacking cough that stops his rummaging through his coat more than once. Why are you taking this worse than I am, Demi? I ask.
When I stopped relying on this body, it was in a fragile state. You are returning to your prime. I am returning to my deathbed.
Demi replies as a piece of metal tears free from the bars, embedding itself in the cement behind us. Demi fishes out a vial of clear liquid, tossing it at a wall between cells. It creates a human-sized hole. We both manage to crawl through just as the beast behind us tears the bars from the cell, filling the room with teeth and fury. The wall behind us buckles as the dog throws itself against it.
How many of those do you have?
I scream, trying to find a way out of one of the locked cells.
They don't come in a six-pack, Alex. That was my only one.
Demi laughs, taking off his jacket, scanning his remaining treasures. I rattle the bars, but realize my arms are motivated by nothing more than flesh and bone again. I rattle loose a bit of dust, but nothing more.
Aha!
Demi says, walking over to the wall, holding a clear crystal jar full of what looks like mud. Bricks crack and fall. We see more of the beast that is seconds away from ending us. Demi dabs a thick line of brown mud on the crumbling wall. The wall is so destroyed we could probably push it over ourselves. But the dog stands still, halting its destruction, a deep rage in its eyes. Demi quickly spreads the concoction over the other walls and bars, laughing like a madman.
What is that crap?
I asked, confused as about the nature of our salvation.
Little bit of everything. Holy water from Rome, soil from Mecca, scrapings from the Wailing Wall, sacred tobacco, and plenty of other herbs and spices. See, that thing can tear through the power of the void, but what I just did is consecrate our little cell. I'm betting it can't or won't desecrate it to get in.
Demi says this proudly, displaying that wicked smile of his. We take a moment, me catching my breath, Demi coughing up blood and semi-solids. The hunter walks up slowly, his cane ringing, even through overgrown vegetation, burning patches of it wherever it touches the ground.
What about me, though?
Victor says, walking in front of the cell. In one hand, he holds a jerry can, I assume full of something flammable. I've seen this before. Dowsing. It's how people are handled when they represent a real danger in prison. Marines, professional fighters, anyone who could still take a few people out if you sent your people in with their best gear. The difference between a prison cell and a brick oven is fire. Once one gets started, it doesn't stop until the cell is scoured clean.
I've got no problem pissing all over your holy goo. And I'm sure Johnny will forgive me.
He twists the spout of the can off, splashing it in the cell. I try and go in a corner or under a bed, but there isn't a point.
You! Come over here and get a life lesson,
Victor says to the remaining film crew. They come over, shuffling, seemingly as terrified of him as us.
If you ever find yourself in a situation like this, don't trap them and run. Don't put a steel pipe through their head and assume you've killed them. You don't stop destroying these things till there is nothing left but ash.
Victor empties the can. I'm sure Demi would be panicking, but he can't seem to breathe in, the fumes sending him into a gore-soaked coughing fit. Victor brings out a Zippo, striking it. He smiles. Looks like he's about to say something heroic. Then it starts. A torrent of wind sweeps through the jail. A hurricane-force wind that rips the lighter from Victor's hand. Both him and the film crew struggle to remain on their feet, kneeling and grabbing cell bars or stair rails to avoid being tossed from the walkway. The fog is dispersed in an instant. The fungal, spreading mold torn from the surfaces of the prison, torn from its moorings and sent spinning, tumbleweed into the deep shadows. Demi takes a deep breath, his skin turning waxy, fingers turning into gnarled claws. Dark tendrils extend from the shadows, dressing him in his coat. Flesh and bone is rejected from me, with enough force to shred it against the cell walls. I feel strong, for a moment, ready for round 2. As usual, Demi shits all over that.
Now would likely be a good time to mention that consecrating the walls is going to make it a bit difficult for us to get out,
he says. The wind dies down. The people outside our cell are shaken, trying to get their bearings. We hear footsteps, then clapping, then a familiar voice, but impossibly loud.
Oh, Victor! You had one job. Find the girl, pass on the message. But you couldn't even do that. Had to be the hero, had to go in half-cocked and pissed off.
Lisa, I could see her through the cracks in the masonry. Slight, but with a confidence that seems about right for something that can summon a tornado in a building. The dog hunches in the cell, knowing pure evil. It springs at the tiny woman. Without so much as a wave of her hand, she redirects the creature's momentum. It turns into a blur as it speeds through the air, slamming into the walkway on the other side of the cell block. It hangs there, screaming and howling, metal spars skewering it, holding it, almost crucified in the open air.
So, I guess I was smart to keep an eye on you. For the record, Vic, I would have let you go. I just knew you wouldn't be smart enough to follow simple instructions.
Lisa finishes, standing in front of the cell. She looks to Demi and myself, dressed in a perfectly fitted suit. In dark gray and black, she cuts a classic figure of the devil. Before she gets a chance to speak, a haunting melody begins to play. She gets a dazed look on her face, and I look to see Victor playing an old, cracked flute. His face is full of righteous indignation at odds with his awkward playing of the instrument. But whatever it is, it seems to hold Lisa in place. He stops playing, tapping her head with the flute. I knew you were watching, but I also banked on you having enough on your plate you couldn't do it 24 hours a day. I've been sitting on this little fella for a long time. I'm guessing you've seen it before? He puts a round through Lisa's leg. Besides the smoking hole, she shows no reaction. Say goodbye to your boss, Victor says, aiming the pistol at Lisa's head. I can't tell you what happened, but when it was over, Lisa was holding Victor over her head, one-handed by his thigh. He kicks and thrashes, but has no angle of attack. She plucks the cane from his grasp, tossing it away. He fires the gun till it's dry, but each round passes harmlessly through her.
Child of Hamlin, you really bought that? I had more faith in you than that, Victor. Anyone who knows what I was or am is long dead. I've spread a web of lies and misinformation for longer than your family name has existed.
Lisa shakes her head and chuckles as she says this, walking over to the railing, still effortlessly holding Victor. She threads his leg through two of the bars, leaning his weight just a bit to one side. She lets go, turning to speak to us. The hunter struggles to stay straight while avoiding falling over the edge. He doesn't last long, falling toward the walkway, shattering and twisting his knee, leaving him nearly tied to the railing by his own leg. His scream is mercifully short, pain and trauma taking him from consciousness.
Now, Alex, you and I need to have a talk,
Lisa says, unbuttoning her shirt, revealing that sigil of gold and silver, the copied rune that has caused so much shit in my life. It cracks open, and what comes out is a sad, stunted little thing. Nothing more than half a lung and some blunted insectile legs.
You and I have an exchange to make. You get this stunted little runt, a god-eater, but one that will never have the guile or force to use you as a puppet. One more, your speed. I get the paragon I saddled you with.
Lisa's tone is almost lecturing. Hate to break this to you, but I severed that connection long ago. Your guess is as good as mine where that thing is. I spit, walking to the bars, feeling the burn from the consecrated steel, even from half a foot away.
Not in any of the ways that matter. Say the word, shed your burden.
I make the mistake of staring into Lisa's eyes as she speaks. I struggle to keep the words from forming.
Alex, I hate to say this, but I was holding out on you,
Demi says. This is followed by a small tink of shattered glass. In an instant, the floor beneath Lisa is gone, taking the sliding door of the cell with it. Demi is past me, bounding like the midnight horror he truly is. I clear the hole and just about reach the stunned film crew when I hear Victor.
Help,
he says weakly, adding,
I can get you out of here.
I don't know why I chose to trust him. Lack of options, likely. But I untwisted his mangled leg, put him under one arm, and sprinted to catch up with Demi. The film crew scatters. I tell them to follow us, but there really isn't any point. They're pawns at worst and collateral damage at best. We make it out of the cell blocks, taking a moment in the staff room to regroup. We hear the noises of Lisa taking out her frustration on the film crew behind us. We know we don't have much time.
Would I be right in assuming someone in this room was at some point a surgeon with a couple 100 years of experience?
Victor says, seemingly at random. Demi looks at him, curious.
Go on.
There's an object about the size and shape of a silver dollar somewhere in the middle of my brain. Something a lot like yourself put it there as punishment for my brother not fulfilling his end of a deal. It takes something away from me. Something that could help you guys get out of here. But it's in deep enough, I'm not surviving getting it taken out. If you can save enough gray matter to keep me breathing for a bit, I can get you 2, maybe 4 minutes with that thing stripped of everything that makes her scary, Victor says. Then we go in there and tear her apart? I say, completing the thought. No. Too many variables. If I can't keep it up, or die in 20 seconds, you both die on the spot. Whatever she is, it's beyond any of us. Victor explains. You scare her. Convince her to live to fight another day. She's a bully. She won't stand her ground without an advantage. Demi pulls out an ancient leather surgeon's bag. Impossibly sharp scalpels, bone saws, and picks catch the minimal light in the staff room. There is no sterilization. No anesthetic. Just a brave man. And a monster that seems enthralled at getting to sift through a living brain. The sounds of murder get closer and eventually stop. Only slightly after Demi uses a long, silver set of forceps to take out a round, black disc from deep inside Victor's head. The hunter is babbling, rambling. But as the cursed coin is removed, both Demi and myself can feel the pure power radiating from the man. Lisa doesn't open the rusted metal door. The entire wall simply dissolves in front of us, erased. She stands, covered in blood and gore, dust and flecks of concrete. Her hatred is tangible. Everything behind her turns into a black hellscape. Her eyes glow light like lighthouses portending disaster. Victor slowly raises his head, blood pouring from the trepanned hole in his skull. He raises a shaking hand, almost accusatory toward Lisa. What comes from his mouth isn't heroic. It was incoherent and sad enough to make my heart sink. But the power behind it felt like an artillery shell landing. Walls around Lisa shattering, the hellscape being torn apart like stage curtains. The woman, in an instant, stripped of that demon spawn aura of hers. Unlike the grenade from earlier, Demi and myself were untouched. I don't bother with being subtle. No shadows creeping, no strange noises or smells. I rush the wisp of a woman. She raises her hands to defend herself, but I send her to the ground with a backhanded slap. I begin to contemplate just ending it, stomping on her face before Victor's last heroic act was over. But I learned from my mistakes. I don't know what contingencies or help Lisa has, but I do know being out of her reach will be a drastic improvement on my life. Give me a couple months, Lisa. Then we can settle this on even terms, without Demi or your little errand boy getting in the way. I lie. I don't want to just beat you, I want your job. But it's going to be a lot easier taking over your troops if I can do it holding your severed head. So how about you run before I decide to take my chances with a hostile takeover? I'm inches from her face, ink dripping from my mouth and eyes, sizzling and burning as it hits the floor. The fear in her eyes made everything worth it. If she managed to destroy me with some vile trick then and there, I would have died happy. Watching her scramble, scratched and bleeding, suit torn and image destroyed, was almost as satisfying.
Good bluff, Alex. And then again, you did learn from the best.
Demi says when we feel Lisa leave the building. He walks over to Victor, who is still barely clinging on to life. He tilts the man's head forward.
Seems I did a better job than intended. Alex, go find me some rubbing alcohol, bandages, and antibiotics. Looks like I get to be the hero now.
Victor was ready and willing to sacrifice himself for the cause. All things considered, I'm sure that's what he would have preferred to do. But the universe, in its infinite boredom and ire, didn't want things working out that way. Demi worked in a blur of blue steel. No totem or concoction would have been able to save Vic. What he was, what he had unleashed inside of him, burned away anything with a hint of curse or magic. But against all odds, after days of thieving blood and supplies, Vic stabilized. But he wasn't the man he once was. Regardless of the skill in removing the coin or patching the hero, at the end of the day, the man had lost part of his brain. His entire left side was nearly immobile, and while it didn't confine him to a wheelchair, walking or even standing was a painful, often short-lived act of defiance from this wounded warrior. His thinking is fogged. He finds himself given to bouts of depression or anger, his gifts acting only in stuttering bursts. But at no point does he give up. He uses his insight to guide us to entities and legends, letting me continue my dark journey, pointing its wrath in a more deserving direction. My mental health begins to rapidly improve. Demi, on the other hand, the lack of innocent kills, dark rituals, and general occult shitheadery is wreaking havoc on the forces keeping his centuries-old form alive. He's by no means the lung-shedding old man I saw in the prison, but day by day I notice him struggle a little more. All three of us are in the basement of a small hospital in a rural town. Nothing abandoned, no haunted wing. Demi simply walked us in one night, showed a doctor a faded old business card, and we were given run of a small part of the building, no questions asked. Demi always has a trick up his sleeve, it seems.
So, Demi, I've got a question for you,
Vic says, bringing up a window on an old dust-caked computer.
4 murders in Poland, 1926. Sex workers, real similar to some of your other work. Ring a bell?
Demi doesn't reply.
For God's sakes, what am I going to do? Call the cops? I know you killed them. Searched everything I could on you before I came charging in. But look at the cause of death. Not just in one article, but every mention of them I can find. Coal mine explosion. Nothing all that strange, except how do 4 working girls from 4 different cities who never met each other all die in the same industrial explosion?
Vic feels certain. His energy is high. Demi and I walk over, reading the dozen or so pages Vic has up, confirming the information.
So I started searching places you two have been. Things you've killed, people you murdered. Any entity that got in your way. It never existed. Any spree you two went on. The news reports are gone. It's like it never happened. I don't think I'd have ever even noticed, except I've been after some of the things you've crossed paths with. I've heard you tell the stories. But even now, I don't remember exactly what they were or why I was after them.
Vic says, sounding as if he has solved some kind of mystery, but I'm not following.
He's saying you destroy legends, Alex. Some are a blight upon flesh, land, or crops. You are a blight on recognition,
Demi says, sounding intrigued.
Bingo, Top Hat. It explains a few things. Why you've been getting away with everything under the sun, why this whole debacle isn't attracting more attention, and why you are falling apart, Demetrius. You're a monster, but a few months of clean hands shouldn't be bringing you down this hard.
Vic's concern is real. Strange as it is, him and Demi seem to get along. Even if they don't seem to be able to, they're both driven by the need to make a name for themselves. Different paths, to be sure, but 2 men who had to take a hard turn into sacrificing everything they have for the world, regardless of their motivations.
Would explain why we haven't heard from Lisa and her little troop in some time. Not much use sending a spy if you can't recognize it when it gets back,
Demi says, contemplative.
What can we actually do with this information, guys?
I ask.
Well, I say we change focus. I know Lisa is going to have a hard time finding us. Why not go after the God Eater and nip this situation in the bud? Vic replies. And that started our search for the plague that was incubated in my body and soul. We traveled across America, following feelings and hunches, and we ran across a handful of scary things, even more hoaxes, but never managed to stumble across the God Eater. I sat in a coffee shop just after 1 a.m., Vic and Demi sleeping in shifts a few blocks away in a cheap hotel room. Lisa sits across from me, her outfit subdued, jeans and black dress shirt, her hair a muted black. You wanted to talk. Talk, I say, my tone level, calm. For a moment I think of the crowd around us, charmed by the illusion of ourselves we are presenting, not knowing they are feet away from death and horror on a scale few believe is real.
Easy, girl, easy. Just the fact you're willing to have a little sit down with me shows we were well on our way to solving this without a bunch of bloodshed. That's a good thing, don't you think?
Lisa smiles, ordering 2 drinks complex enough I half wonder if the barista is going to accidentally summon a demon.
I think you ruined my life and the lives of everyone that died by my hands since.
My tone is still calm, but I can feel a deep rage building.
And I, unlike anyone else involved, will finally admit that. You were a pawn. You got the short end of the stick. Sad Charlie Brown music. Boo-hoo. But let's look forward. Me having the God Eater, it's not going to change anything for all these little cattle walking around. We are past the days of things like myself ushering in an age of darkness. If I decided to drag myself and my army into the light, me and 10 kilometers around me would be nuked into glass. The tax the shadows take from humanity would remain about the same. It'd just all go to me. Does it really matter to them who's collecting the blood they spill to you? I'd purge you of all your curses. Let you live out a normal life. Or shit, live forever, whatever you want. Even let you bring your little Boy Scout friend to make sure everything is on the up and up. Throw in a new lobe for him in the bargain. You are putting yourself through the fucking meat grinder because of the ego of 2 men. One wants to be me, one is bitter because I defended myself from his family. Do what's best for you, girl, not them.
Lisa's saleswoman's slick tone drips honey and promise.
That's your angle? Girl power, I say as the coffee arrives. You take everything I built, everything I knew, away from me. You set some kind of monster hunter after me. You horrify, harass, and harangue me to the point where the person I was died sometime last year. And that is the best olive branch you can find?
I laugh, loudly, a cackling, mocking shriek. A few of the sleepy-eyed and opiate-headed patrons look over. I wipe away black tears. Not that any of them would have seen the thick fluid.
Wrap your thick head around it any fucking way you like. For me, this comes down to simple economics, hun. I don't want to waste good peons wearing you down in a brawl. So right now, I'm willing to negotiate. Next time we have to have a talk about this, I will be making a demand.
Lisa growls, something in her face giving way for just a second. Just an almost undetectable flash of something old, twisted, and furious.
Negotiation,
I say, my smirk making its way into my tone.
Okay, how about this? You and I get adjoining hotel rooms for a week. Just 2 gals getting room service and watching television. After that, you can have whatever you want.
A look of shock. She wasn't expecting me to know.
That's what I thought, Lisa. You think everyone around you are nothing more than ants, totally incapable of our own plans, acting on our own will or motivation. You want to brawl? I've got Victor a half block away locked and loaded. How'd that go last time? I remember the smell of piss, you running, and maybe a sad trumpet noise. Sound about right?
I'm lying about Vic, of course. Neither of my companions have any idea where I am. Lisa composes herself. forcing that saturnine smile back on her face.
You think I didn't bring friends?
She says, pointing out the window. At first, I see nothing. Just a deep black alley across the street. Then there's a shifting, a massive shape reaching to nearly the second floor of the building next to it. It leans forward, exposing a gray, emotionless face, one that I've never seen in person, but belonging to someone I've heard a lot about. I look back to Lisa as the thing sinks back into the shadows.
His sister? Really? You couldn't have had just a tiny bit of decency?
I say, not shocked, not angry, just disgusted.
You know what? You want to negotiate? Fine. If I'm dying by your hand, nothing I can do about it, no hope, I'll give you the fucking God Eater. In return, you leave her out of this. Bring in something worse for all I care, just not her. Can we agree?
No,
she says, with a wicked, petty smile.
I negotiate for what I want, not what something is willing to give me. You hide behind your friends and your ethereal fart cloud. I'll find a way past them. I'll take what I want if it means reaching inside your little skull and working you like a puppet. But before I do that, I'm going to make your little hero friend watch his big sis do all kinds of horrible shit. Make him really soak in how much of a fucking failure his entire family is.
She gets up and leaves. I think about taking my chance, unleashing every kind of hell I can and hoping for the best. But this has gotten long past the point of being some kind of brawl. We aren't wild animals. We're leaders, putting into place plans and schemes. We're fighting with situations and events, not rotting fists and shadow tendrils. What the fuck have I become? In the end, we didn't have to search for the God Eater. It found us.
I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm just saying that you are literally half blind. Is it possible that we missed some turns?
I say to Vic. We drive a massive black mid-80s Cadillac through an on-ramp that should, logically, be leading us out of the latest small town we passed through. Once or twice, maybe. But this is our 6th attempt. Something is going on, Vic replies. There's a thick forest on either side of us. Vic's right. Something feels strange. I scan the trees for any concrete sign I'm right. It didn't come in the form of a leering face from the woods, or a lumpen deer abomination. The fact there was simply no more highway exit on our 7th pass was enough to tell me something wanted our attention. The town we enter was not the town we left. This place is small, but pristine. Every business with a fresh coat of paint, every car without a scratch, not a single cigarette butt nor candy bar wrapper blowing through a gutter. It's a little after 11 p.m., but every business on Main Street is open. Harsh white light illuminating the streets in off-putting perfect rectangles. All around this little Mayberry clone, signs proudly state, "Welcome to Cheshire Mill. The grateful welcome you." What should we do? Vic asks. I hope against logic for him to have some kind of clear flash of information. We try a few other ways out of the town before completely giving up and finding the only old hotel. We discuss just sleeping in the car, but decide that walls between us and whatever is going on couldn't be a bad thing. The parking lot is barren, not even a bicycle chained up to a sign. Every room, though, is brightly lit from the inside. The hotel lobby, a lighthouse in the night. I open the door, Demi behind me, and Vic behind him moving one slow step at a time, his cane arm shaking slightly. The man behind the counter is tall, square-headed with small, closely spaced eyes. He's already holding a key out to us. His lips are dry, his gums are pale and cracked. I find myself wondering how long he's been standing like this.
Alex, how nice to meet you and your friends. You're in our VIP suite room 10.
The man says. His eyes never seem to quite focus. We're all thinking we should turn tail and run. We smell the metaphorical fire smoldering, sense the danger. But at that moment, it seems there's nowhere to run. As we walk to our room, Guests part curtains, each room adding a new set of eyes watching our every move. Each random person having a dull, blank-faced expression. The group seeming to move in unison following our movements. You've been with me as I've stared down bold-faced horror, and I can't say none of that left its mark on me. But the sense of dread I feel, surrounded by the dozens of sets of dead eyes, chills me. I feel like nothing more than an amusement to something much larger than myself. I expected us to be summoned, called, attacked, or killed the next day. What I didn't expect was nothing. We tried again, in vain, to leave. We walked through every forest and bog trying to find some way to get out of the city, but every time we thought we were about to burst into a clearing to freedom, we ended up back at Cheshire Mill. Everywhere we went, every set of eyes were on us, every window containing a peering face, every stranger maintaining a deadlocked stare. But no matter who we asked, no one told us why we were being kept there. Any scene we made went unremarked upon, any out-of-the-ordinary actions ignored. As days turned to weeks, we realized this had to be the work of the God Eater. Demi and Vic forming theories and explanations, but both of them seemed shocked at the level of planning, of intricacy it was showing. Then, one night, with a knock on our door, we got our answers. When I saw him, I was shocked, and not just by his pristine, white street preacher suit and bright blonde hair. "Scratch?" I said to the man standing in my doorway, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses.
No, Alex. His form just allowed me to better manipulate and herd this town's inhabitants. Your friend was sitting on some severely untapped talent. Really, I'm the streets, the buildings, the people, every glass of water, every pack of cigarettes. You call me the God Eater, but I'm Cheshire Mill. This lump of flesh and ectoplasm is just my easiest way of communicating with you three, given your limited faculties. Come for a walk with me.
The God Eater, wearing Scratch's skin, says. It wasn't a request. With a slimy, undulating movement, the floor under us begins to slide. The doorway widens and we are moved behind the God Eater. All of us try and escape, of course, but the ground itself is against us. Feet gain no purchase, hills form, and when Demi tries to take to the skies on a set of shadowy wings, a street lamp curls around him like the arm of a squid, slamming him back down to the ground. Buildings begin to twist and warp, stretching, and forming a dome over the street. Not even moonlight reaches us in the newly formed corridor. Streetlights flicker and begin to flash with red-orange bursts, turning the glass and concrete tube into a funhouse nightmare. Explosive, wet, crunching noises, people falling, leaping from the buildings, landing in broken, barely living piles around us. Their faces still smiling, their eyes still tracking us.
You may have noticed the lack of children. That is very intentional. When I decided to make this place my home, make this place myself, I wanted to do it as easy as I could. I had to start small, of course, but with each little whelp I stole, I gained another willing member of the grateful. See, I didn't kill the children. I kept them, letting their parents know that should they do the slightest thing to upset me, their offspring would die hard and slow. They didn't know who I was, or what I was, but they knew what I could take away from them in an instant. They obeyed, of course. What choice did they have? Oh, Alex, if there is one thing I would like to thank you for above all else, it's that go for the balls mentality. And favor by favor, follower by follower, I took over this town. They let me into their houses, their businesses, their churches, their heads. Then, I became the town.
That too familiar voice. Scratch was no angel, but seeing his remains used as nothing more than a microphone for the thing that burst from inside me. It's depressing. More bodies fall, crawling from the suburban cave that has formed around us. So what is this? I say, feeling the literal and metaphorical walls closing around us. We see a light off in the distance, pulsing in yellow.
Alex, this is me pleading my case. I stand here knowing what I have done to you, what I could do to the world, and what you want to do in return. This town, it isn't the cruel mockery the bar was way back when. I took my time. I became one with it on any level that matters. And do you know what I found when I did?
The God Eater asks, turning his stolen face to me, begging me to answer. No, I say, glowering, impotent rage shaking my limbs.
I found this is what I want. I watched my mother and the woman who set all this in motion tear themselves to shreds, one striving for godhood, one striving for revenge, neither happy with the world of power they possessed. I learned, Alex. I don't want godhood or infinite power. I've no one to take revenge against. My kind are bred with a deep hunger that cannot be satiated. We are set up to fail. But, as I'm sure Victor will attest to, we can all overcome our handicaps. All I want is for this tie between us to be severed, to be left alone to my dark devices. This town is no different than dozens of others around the world, twisted and warped into an entity with a single grim focus. But they all exist, and the world still turns, practically unaware of their existence.
We get closer to that far-off beacon as the God Eater lays out part of its offer.
If you want to kill me, just do it! After all this, even hell would at least be a change of pace.
I spit.
If I kill you, I destroy a significant part of what I am, and that would take a lot of time and effort to replace. Look around you. If you've kept count, 76 individuals have fell or leapt from the buildings around us. I would kill less people in a decade if I'm left unmolested. I want this town to thrive. All I intend to do is skim a little cream off the top to keep the home fires burning. But I know this isn't the only offer you've received, so I would like to show you everything. Let you know this is no monkey's paw, just what is best for everyone involved.
The God Eater is using every bit of charisma that Scratch didn't touch. He has an evangelical flair, with informal energy. He could just as easily be selling us car insurance as a deal with a demon. The beacon comes into focus. A massive, organic rift in the earth. A mouth-like opening, easily big enough for a couple of buses to pass through without a problem. The sounds of industry come from within, but muffled and distorted. Jobs we've never heard of done with tools we couldn't imagine. Bare-chested, muscle-bound men haul out barrels of a thick fluid and bring in covered minecarts filled with horrors we could only guess at. They all focus on us, somehow keeping on task. There's a rotten, sickly, diabetic breath reek coming from the massive cavern.
This is impressive,
Demi says. I want to remind him what I can do with a rock for the comment, but I keep myself still.
Thank you, Demetrius. Coming from someone like yourself, that is quite a compliment. I want to take you on a tour of the darkest corners of my realm. What you see here is as deep as my depravity reaches. If you can handle the cost within, we come to a deal. If not, we can brawl it out. Though, you all know how that will turn out.
The God Eater sounds almost sad during his last sentence. Could be the old-time religion trappings of his. But it feels as if the creature does want to end this peacefully. We walk into the orifice. The air is damp and humid. As expected, workers have overlapping scars and fresh wounds. Many heed less of gashes or fresh, dripping burns. We walk now, the God Eater trusting we know there is nowhere to run. In a secret tunnel in a city that just seemed to swallow us. There are nothing but dark corners and false hope. He takes us down a corridor with a thick graveyard reek. The lights are dim blue, the workers small, emaciated looking. There's a churning, undulating football field-sized maw. I can't see the bottom, just rows and rows of muscle and every design of tooth I could think of. On all sides of this unnatural pit were the workers, hunched and thin, throwing something from over full minecarts. Bodies, parts of bodies, human, animal, void-born, any type of organic detritus was being shovel-fed to this massive beast.
My stomach. Nothing goes to waste in Cheshire Mill. None of these were fresh kills either. Plenty of the grateful are willing to go on a sojourn or two, crack a lock on a morgue here, and pay some unfortunate souls for their relatives there. Participation is mandatory, but you can't take it with you, as they say. So, why shouldn't I get a little something out of the deal?
He sounds proud now, as if we're watching the first assembly line instead of crippled workers shoveling their dead relatives into a cesspit. The walk to the next room is silent, the God Eater seeming to soak in, leaving the three of us speechless. Me, I prefer to do my business with minimal ranting. The fact that Vic and Demi can do nothing but stare in awe and fear, though, it shakes me. Rows upon rows of hospital beds, the old, the young, freak accidents, and folks that have lost the genetic lottery. The place is cleaner than anything I've seen. No smell, not a speck of dust or dirt anywhere. Jesus fucking Christ, Vic says. I actually see him going for his pistol. I put a hand on his arm. The man knows something I don't, and it's making him suicidal with anger.
Seems Vic is a little ahead of the game on what I'm doing. And care to fill them in, Vic?
The God Eater says with a smile. He might be trying to make a deal, but it sure as hell isn't trying to make friends. I wonder for a moment if this is what having a kid is like. Watching something armed with your worst qualities try and actively fuck up everything around them. This thing is rounding up dying folks so it can siphon off a little bit of their goddamned soul as it separates from their bodies, without having to go through any real effort. No one actually knows what that does to it. But even the ghastliest shit I've met, the worst, bottom-feeding garbage. Just take the whole thing, put it out of its misery. Vic is panting, holding back a fit of coughing. He wants to continue, but his body doesn't want to cooperate.
That's one way of putting it, and one way of thinking about it. But everything I know tells me I'm not taking anything that Soul is going to miss. Especially when the alternative of tearing the body apart and devouring the entire thing is still well within my ability.
The final room held a handful of people behind black, spiked bars. Two of the grateful, massive men armed with steel truncheons guarded the gate. The people inside were obvious victims of torture, unnecessary surgeries, and likely other types of violence I can't even think of. They were afraid, though they were also the most lucid folks we had seen since getting to this godforsaken place.
And this is where the real magic happens. These are those individuals so obtuse as to try and upset the apple cart of my little fiefdom. Harming other citizens and civil disruption, murder, they wind up here. They get to be those lucky few that I use to indulge my remaining vices. And this, Alex, Victor, Demetrius, is what you would be allowing to happen if you strike a deal with me. No more, maybe even less if I grow old and jaded with my amusement.
Like turning down a volume knob, the God Eater mutes the screams of its victims so we can hear it. Demi, Vic, and myself exchange glances, none of us wanting to be the first to give our thoughts.
There are ways to ensure both sides hold up their ends of any bargain.
Demi offers, sounding more unsure of himself than I have ever heard. What do you think, Vic? I say, feeling the momentum of the situation build. If you're asking me if I'm okay with this thing mangling the souls of accident victims? No, I'm not. None of us can do anything about it, though. This fire has gotten out of control. If it wants to set some terms, I don't think we have anything to lose. The words hurt Vic to say, but he means them. Let the kids go and we have a deal, I say, trying to give no signs as to my emotions.
Sorry, Alex. No can do. See, controlling people's minds takes a hell of a toll on them. I need those kids so I don't have to go rooting around in their parents' gray matter. Just show them a picture of little Billy or Susie, 10 feet from death. People drop the pitchforks real quick. Once they grow up and have a couple of little ones of their own I can keep down here, I'll move them on back up to the city. But, believe it or not, the kids are my most effective leash. I suspect, though, you believe that, Alex.
God Eater grins, knowing how little of a negotiation this really is. I'm disgusted that I know what he means. That I see myself in this thing no matter how much I don't want to. Once upon a time, when the most violent thing I've ever done was put a woman's eye out in a bar fight, I managed to get myself in with the worst possible crowd. I thrived, but I wanted more, and I thought that I had the stomach to make it happen, regardless of the cost. The woman I was told to kill was a bad person, but no worse than me, or any other of the dozen or so scumbags I was hanging out with. I won't paint her as some child trafficking drug kingpin just to get sympathy. She made a lot of money doing a lot of sketchy things. She also used her children as a bulletproof vest as much as she could, taking them in the car on money runs, doing business while they were sleeping upstairs. The woman banked on organized crime, leaving family out of things at all costs. I saw the opportunity, and I took it. I will stand by the fact that I didn't know the kids were in the van. But I also can't say that if I knew they were, my actions would have been different. Like a kid holding a dead hamster, I realized too late what I did. Too late to take it back. Too late to do anything other than wait till the knock on the door and the pair of handcuffs on my wrist. Having no choice, we made the deal. We wrote on sacred paper, signed in cursed ink. Both Demi and Vic assured me what would enforce this deal was something neither the God Eater nor we wanted any part of. I don't know if I still have a soul, but putting my name on that page made me feel like a little of it just went away.
24 hours of peace and the document is set. Not a fly killed, not a friendly slap, don't even make a nasty joke. Then we can all part each other's company. Any funny business though, you three, and this one-time offer goes away. The divine underachiever enforcing it, deaf to us forevermore.
The God Eater says. We stand in the street in front of our hotel, the buildings twisting and warping back to normal. Dead-eyed, grateful, putting the pulped bodies, some still twitching, into wheelbarrows to be taken to the caves. All around me I see the shapes from the prison. They come more and more, and each time their forms are clearer. They are my victims. I recognize each one. No one else notices, but they don't need to. Their message is for me alone. We remain. Dozens of thin voices say in unison. We sit in our hotel room. We don't feel relieved or heroic. We feel weak and trapped. I'm surrounded by the literal ghosts of my present sins and the haunting memories of my past. First, there's a high-pitched keening. The three of us looking at each other, confused. Then a sound like an avalanche, followed by an explosion hard enough to turn our windows into a whirlwind of flying glass. As the rubble settles and we leave the hotel room, an upbeat jingle starts to play. I see neon, flashing lights before I see the gaudy children's restaurant come into focus. Pretsu. It sits wedged in the middle of two buildings, masonry still crumbling around it. As the door opens, a palpable wave of energy comes from the building. I see Grateful fall where they stand, rising again, confused and scared, questioning where they are. A few buildings lose that uncanny sheen. Looks like Lisa did some planning. The front doors fly open violently, a teeming mass of horrors within the building part, letting 3 individuals out. One, of course, is Lisa. To her left is a massive creature I've seen once before, but that was in a lightless alley. Lit by the gaudy neon, I see it. I see Tammy in vivid detail. She's been bent and twisted, given proportion well beyond anything remotely human. 10 feet tall at least, with slab-like mismatched muscles. Other than her almost untouched ashen gray face, it's hard to tell the creature was once human. She's encased in overlapping layers of black metal cages, her body covered by thick, torn leather sheets. They shriek in protest as she moves, the cement cracking beneath her. To Lisa's right is a much smaller figure. 6'5", lanky and dressed in a gleaming plague doctor's garb. A miasma of flies and rot seemed to hang around the entity, its mask dripping caustic fluid. It points to Demi, laughing a bubbling, tortured laugh.
That is not good,
Demi says, stating the obvious. You know him? I reply.
You asked me once who taught me my dark secrets. That's him,
Demi says, waving back, trying to show strength none of us feel.
Oh, Alex, you thought you're little.
Lisa begins, I'm sure intending one corker of a rant, but a noise that makes her entrance sound like a wet Christmas cracker begins from the middle of the town. Once, I called something a mountain range. I was exaggerating for effect. As we looked toward the middle of the city, what I saw rising was a mountain of flesh and bone, concrete and steel, half a city forming and twisting itself into a mockery of human form, staring down at our warring factions with a contempt reserved for gods and judges. I've been scared. I thought I was staring death in the face. But this raw display of power, the arching black bolts, the birds dropping dead from the skies, the sudden pouring yellow rain, I had to fight the urge to drop to my knees in worship.
You have destroyed our chance at peace. This experiment in moderation has failed,
the God-Eater says in a voice that cracks foundations. It tilts its massive, almost infantile head back and begins to speak in a language that makes the air feel thin and charged, each word blending and looping back upon itself.
A hand to the gods,
Demi says softly. Direct line to the divine. No telling what you're going to get, except that it's going to be mighty pissed off, being taken away from what it's doing, Vic explains. This is world-ending, Alex, even without the God-Eater. If this is completed, whatever comes through is going to cause another dark age. We hear a stampede noise. Looking around, we see Grateful. But the hundreds pouring down the streets, climbing down from windows, their eyes glowing with a vile red light, their skin beginning to crack and split. Entities begin to stream from the Pretzu building, a clown car of every horror I've met, heard, or read about. Through it all, Lisa stares at me, a hateful look as if this is all my fault. As the first wave of Grateful clash with Lisa's army, we run. We take twisting allies, dodge chunks of burning debris, and Grateful, too slow to keep up with the main mob. The town is chaos. We stand in a crumbling store trying to regroup and think of a plan.
If we can get to the thing, I can silence it enough to disrupt the ritual. The problem is, the backlash will leave this town a crater filled with nothing but the cursed souls of the dead,
Demi says. Speaking of, I see the specter of my victims around me, more of them than ever. Every inch of the shop covered in horrified, mutilated faces, going out in a blaze of glory, what people like me are born to do, Vic says. There is no debate. We all know what we need to do. But the universe wasn't quite done with shitting on our day just yet. We hear a tapping from the door of the shop. The plague doctor leans against it, casually, as if we're not all standing on the site of the apocalypse. Demi reaches into his jacket, quickly pulling out a tiny sprig of a plant and tossing it at the ground. Walking forward, the plague doctor draws a small spray bottle, and with a puff of noxious drizzle, the plant dies. Faster than I can track, Demi throws a glass vial at the creature. With practiced ease, the doctor catches it, placing it gently in his own overcoat.
Someone's gotten a little faster since the last time we met,
Demi says, holding his cane like a cudgel, and drawing a long, clean silver knife.
See, you're still wearing that mask, though. Haven't gotten used to the facelift I gave you yet.
Demi goads the plague doctor into action. It closes the distance, slamming its face mask into Demi's head, grabbing him by his neck. We need to get going, Vic says, tugging at my arm. Demi, you got this? I say, more out of respect than anything. Vic is right. We can't waste time.
Likely not, love, but this prick won't be walking away intact.
Demi vomits a clear, almost sparkling substance onto the plague doctor. The thing's mask burns and melts. Demi lands on his feet as his adversary tears off the mask, tossing it into the night. It Its face looks like a parody of a Picasso painting. All the right features in all the wrong places. I stare for a second before following Victor into the night. Our progress is slow. Raving groups of grateful roaming the streets, looking for anything that doesn't belong. I don't worry for myself. In fact, I feel stronger than I have in a long time. But poor Vic. He's armed with a pistol and a gift that he can't rely upon. We stand at the end of a long alley, staring at the spectacle. A block away, Lisa and her army are clashing with frenzied zealots by the hundred, infused by some dark energy that makes them keep on going long after they should be dead. In the sky, the God Eater, hundreds of feet tall now, arranges pillars, makes sacrifices, and keeps chanting in that Ouroboros of a language. Lisa is wading through grateful, splattering them with nothing more than a look. Beside her, Tammy goes to work in a much more physical way. Even with her twisted, crippled form, her movements are economical, tactical, taking out grateful by the half dozen with nothing more than a swipe of her fist or throwing her body to the side. Go! Lisa screams frantically to her patchwork bodyguard, pointing at us. Through the smoke in the distance, I notice something I haven't seen before. Lisa is bleeding. The thought gives me a rush. I don't know how or why, but this fight is stretching this callous tumor of a creature too thin.
You need to get me close enough to whisper in her ear.
Vic says. I can barely hear him over the din of battle, or the stomping threat of his sister trudging toward us.
We prepare for shit like this. Every family in the business, we know we can become a liability in an instant. You get me close enough, she is out of the fight.
I clear my mind, waiting for the charge. Ink pooling on my skin, then dripping, thick lines mixing with the yellow rain. I don't fight. I'm not a bouncer or a superhero. I'm a monster. I stay out of her way, making her chase me, bending my body at impossible angles, all the while dripping my toxic ichor. Lisa laughs. She thinks she's seeing fear or trepidation. No, she's seeing someone that knows who she is. Things like me make things feel helpless, frustrated, fatalistic. We turn minor advantages into seemingly impenetrable armor. We turn your rage into stupidity, and your stupidity into death. Tammy doesn't notice her movement slowing, the grasping, suckling ooze lacing itself through the cage armor, until she finds herself stuck, struggling in vain to take even one more step. Vic walks out of the alley. I see at some point during the fight he killed a grateful, the dead-eyed meat puppet clasping its head around a slit throat. He's crying, his lone eye nearly closed. He walks up to his only family, whispering one word into her ear, Nemo. Her body begins to crumble, the steel holding firm as the flesh within turns to dust in a matter of seconds, scattering in the torrent of wind, leaving nothing to desecrate, mutilate, or use. I lock eyes with Lisa. I don't know how much of her power is tied up in keeping the earth itself from just swallowing her little troop, but I don't care. It's long past time to get things settled, and even if that last thing I see is some divine being splitting reality, I'll be happy if the second last is her being torn apart. Chunks of concrete lift themselves from the street, slamming into me. My bones crack, organs pulp, but I walk on, the ink-saturated water behind me drawing itself up into vicious, foot-long black points. I see the anger in Lisa's face. She locks eyes with me, assaulting me with images of every depraved act I have committed. I smile. I look to the dozens of spirits around me, only I can see. That won't work. I've had plenty of reminders of how I got here. I've accepted who I am. Isn't that right, everyone? I scream to the chorus of the dead. We remain is the thundering reply. But this time, I'm not the only one seeing it. Not the only one hearing it. Lisa looks scared and shocked, suddenly surrounded by the results of our handiwork. We're 10 feet apart, and I can see the panic in her eyes. She tries shifting herself into some other form, one of Denny's favorite tricks, But with a flickering burst of psychic energy, Victor disrupts the trick. Lisa, I thought they were here to taunt me, to drive me insane. But no, they wanted to see how this all played out. They wanted to see if the heartless thing that set these events in motion ever got what she deserved. That is why they remain, I say, feeling a sense of understanding come over me. Lisa springs at me like a landmine, wrapping herself around my chest in an instant. Steel fingers tear at my flesh. She drives a leg through my stomach. Her teeth shred dried muscle and bone. But it's the last act of a trapped animal. The ink bleeding from me begins to boil and melt her flesh. But beyond that, one by one the spirits, those who remain, enter her body. At first she seems to revel in this, thinking to steal their power. But more and more of the things walk from the shadows, ones I recognize, ones I don't. Likely the victims the woman has collected in her long, twisted existence. Her body shakes and thrums like an overturned guitar string. She tries to get away, but I drive a thumb under her collarbone, holding her out in front of me at arm's length like a soiled diaper. With a screaming burst of gore and souls, Lisa, all her debauched plans and all her heartless deeds are over. As one, her group of thrall break off from the fight with the grateful, losing a third of their number in the process. 30 entities, I'd say. Shades, Gauro, formless blobs, all intent on taking revenge for their fallen master. I'm riding an emotional high, but even that doesn't make me stupid. Even if I could win. The sky is beginning to turn a deep pink color. The stars seem to spin and blur. We need to get to the God Eater, but we have the dregs of 2 armies standing in front of us. Something goes rolling by my feet. A severed head, dripping green, clotted blood. One with eyes on its cheek and a vertical mouth.
Do I have to do everything myself?
I hear Demi say as I turn around. He's shirtless, some kind of chemical having melted and scarred his upper half beyond recognition. His face is nothing more than a white skull. His top hat, though, stands untouched. He seems wobbly and struggles to stand for a moment, eventually losing the battle and hitting the ground. The loose clatter of bones makes my heart sink. I can't even tell what's holding him together. The pack is closing in, the grateful behind them. I begin to see the flickers of alien features in the sky, hear intruding thoughts deep in the back of my mind.
Well, I guess we are down to the final option. I'm game if you are, Vic, though I'd be happy for an alternate suggestion.
Demi says, sounding exhausted. No, this seems like the time to ride off into the sunset. Alex, answer this question. Are you a good person? Vic turns to me as I feel a light, almost uplifting energy start to build. What? I stammer. After all this, after your trials, are you a good person? Vic repeats. There's a strange, commanding tone to his voice. I don't know, is my truthful answer. Guess we're going to find out, he says, reaching into his jacket. He pulls out something it takes me a second to recognize. If me from 6 years ago knew this, she'd slap me. It's a tattoo machine. He passes it to me, and as he does, he seems to lose something. I can't put my finger on it, but as I take the machine, he's giving something of his to me. Use that wisely. Now, if you excuse me, I've got some work to do, Vic says, cocking his pistol. He starts walking toward the grateful and firing. His march is certain death.
Guess I can't let that Boy Scout take all the glory. Don't make his sacrifice in vain, Alex. Go end this,
Demi says, standing. He takes a selection of baubles from his hat, then lays it gently on the ground. He shatters them in one hand, and with a burst of smoke, a crack of bone, and a flash of energy, he is a roiling combination of every form, every trick in his arsenal. The 20-foot smoke-wreathed specter glides toward the crowd, the warring forms making it a new terror from one second to the next. I should bolt to the God Eater, but I stay, knowing Demi would want me to roll my eyes at his last speech.
You thrice-damned cartoon characters have never had to bring a city to its knees using nothing more than a blade in your hands. You've never lived through the questing knights and the noble inquisitors. You've never sat for decades formulating a plan to wreak havoc on a country. You are petty, sad, rage-filled little things. I was the very bad men. I was the Hun General. I was the Axeman and the Zodiac Killer. I am the fucking Ripper!
His final scream rivals that of the God Eater as he wades into the morass of lesser creatures, bodies already beginning to split and fly into the air. I don't let their sacrifices become meaningless. I run as fast as my muscles and the dark energy driving me will carry me. The tattoo gun radiates power. It feels right. I stand in front of the God Eater. It waves its arms, leaving glowing red patterns in the air. From the rift, I can see one claw starting to tug and tear at the veil between worlds. My head swims with visions of alien worlds enslaved or destroyed. It's a 60-foot climb before concrete and steel gives way to flesh. Looking at my lone weapon, I torch against the darkness. I know I need to get to some bare skin. I'm no more than an ant on the body of the God Eater. Too small and meaningless for it to even take the time to smear me into paste. The wind is a hurricane now. I look down and see Demi still shredding monsters, and the grateful. But the magic is taking its toll on him. He screams with the pain of the transformations, almost gets taken down, but still keeps fighting the noble fight. Jesus, did I just say that? About him? My claws can barely find purchase. I'm hanging, swinging by one hand more than one. But I grab all the harder, feeling the powerful weight of the tattoo machine in my pocket. I see orange, fake-looking flesh, just out of reach. One massive arm the size of a town, starting to reach its way toward the God Eater. Whatever is behind that curtain begins to talk. Gravity starts to lighten, light starts to bend and slow. I bury one arm deep into the God Eater, the other fishing out the tattoo machine. It glows now, a pure white light. I dip the gun into one of my rivulets of ink running down my body. The God Eater starts to thrash now, noticing me, but too giant, too malformed to simply flick me off. I think for a second, blank as to what to do. But almost before I think my hand is guiding the gun, one deformed hand tears a leg from my body. 2 cement plates crush my hips, but I don't falter. When I'm done, there's a simple, hand-sized tattoo, a set of prison bars. There was no explosion, not in the normal sense. But as I put the last dot in that tattoo, a ripple of energy pulsated from that void in reality, severing the grasping arm. Mercifully, I lost consciousness before I hit the ground. I woke up the next day, laying in a ruin of a city. Corpses of friends, enemies, grateful, and entities. My own wounds were healed enough to walk, so I decided to survey the city. I saw Demi, broken and torn apart, the remaining scraps of his flesh deformed and warped. I half expected him to spring back up with a grin on his face, but as I picked up one hand, I knew he was gone. I could probably make better use of that help. I look over. Vic is torn up, leaning against a destroyed fountain. Half his ribs are broken, his arms hang uselessly at his sides. How? I say, wondering how he survived when a monster like Demi was brought down. No one had time to finish me off once he started doing his one good deed, Vic says with a cough. I intend to have a deep conversation, but behind us, we hear a small sneeze. I turn and see 50 or so children, dirty, scratched, and looking like they haven't seen sunlight in a couple years. And that is the end of my story. This town is full of lingering weirdness and a generation of kids that have had a nightmare of a childhood. I could leave, but what the hell would I go do? Haunt some library? No, this town needs help. And maybe, if I can do some good here, sometime down the road, Vic and I can offer some kind of service to people who have gotten in over their head. I don't know what the future holds, but I can actually answer Vic's question now, and it sets me at ease. I wasn't a good person. I can see and accept that. But even with all the shit I've caused, I am now. Demi's counter got lost in the brawl, but I don't think I'm going to need it. I know I can't be some kind of superhero, but at least I can be good. Hello, everyone. If you're newer to my channel, you might not know that I used to do book clubs at the end of my longer series, and I decided to bring that back for this one. Basically, I just talk about what went into making it, any weird quirks that happened during the production process, or what I thought about the story. This story was really fun to make. I'm working with an author I'd never worked with before, HughEhhoule. I hope I'm saying that right. And, basically, if you haven't been following along with the production of the series, we put out the first episode and then asked for people's opinions and waited, saw what they thought, and then kept writing, and we did that for all 5 episodes. And I'm not sure how much the author took inspiration from your comments, but I'm almost certain that a lot of you helped steer this production in a certain direction, so thank you so much for interacting when I asked for your opinions, for helping me out with that. Honestly, you all made this so much better. If I ever do this story again, which I've already decided that maybe in the future I'm gonna reboot it, I really want to get more people to play the characters. It was a little rough having to switch between super deep-voiced Vic, or at least I tried, to make my voice as deep as possible, to Alex, to Lisa, who had a really high-pitched voice. It was a little bit whiplashy, but that was my own fault. Unfortunately, with this story, I just didn't have the time to get anybody else. But if I do redo the story, I already know who I would cast. Vic would definitely be Big Daddy Stone. If you don't know, my actual real-life father has a narration channel called Big Daddy Stone. He's been in quite a few stories with me. And he would make a great Vic with his, deep, burly voice. I think that I would probably ask Spirit Voices to be Lisa. She played Tammy, but she only had a couple of lines, and she is a fantastic voice actor with just a gorgeous voice. So I would probably cast her as Lisa as well as Tammy. I think the Dark Somnium did a killer job as Scratch, the God Eater in the final part, and Demi. He played those characters for me, especially as Demi. He just killed it. He did so well. So those would definitely all stay the same. But I really actually enjoyed playing all the characters. Vic was really fun, a challenging experience. I've been working really hard on how deep I can get my voice, and he was definitely a testament to that. I had to do a lot of warm-ups. I had to look up a bunch of tips. I wanted to try and get his voice deeper than any other narration voice I've ever done. Since I had to do him, I thought, why not just try really hard to differentiate him, since I had to do 3 voices. So let me know, did I do all right? Did you all think I sounded okay as Vic, Alex, and Lisa? There were a few scenes where all 3 of them talked in succession or around the same time, and I think it sounded okay, but I'm curious to see what you all thought. When you were listening, were there any moments when you were like, I can't tell who that's supposed to be? Or did I do a pretty good job in using my voice to try and differentiate them? Let me know in the comments. This story, first of all, I loved it. I think I already said that, but I really enjoyed the plot. I thought it was fun. It didn't have a lot of stuff that you see all the time, like, you know, especially with how nosleep, I feel like a lot of the stories on there follow trends. And this story just felt like a very organic, it came together and it was just unique, you know? It's funny because I'm releasing this near-ish to Halloween, and last year on Halloween I did a story that this sort of reminds me of with the ending. The story I did was called Upon a Crimson Throne. If you've heard it, tell me if you also think that the ending was similar, not because of what happened, but like, it's kind of hard to explain unless you've heard both. But in Upon a Crimson Throne and the Hollow Promises series, the ending sort of has a very similar feel, and I'm not even sure if I know how to explain it. All this super huge stuff starts happening, you know, like sky opening, like crazy stuff, world-ending stuff. And for some reason, when I was recording it, I was like, I'm really thinking of Upon a Crimson Throne right now. So if you've heard that, let me know why you think that might be, if you kind of understand what I'm trying to get at with that parallel. The sound design for this story wasn't too bad. Honestly, I didn't go as hard on the sound design as I could have, especially in Pretsu. And that's not because I didn't want to, but more so because I'm just stretched kind of thin right now. I have a lot of stuff I'm working on. So also, if I ever redo it, I think I would go a lot more in depth with the sound design. Pretsu had a lot of parts that had action, and the last part did too, and I sort of tried to just give myself a little bit of leeway, and I would have spent many more hours working on it if I'd not stopped when I did, so it's probably better that I didn't force myself to keep going, but I still like how the sound design came out. You know, having lots and lots of, like, every little thing sound designed isn't always the best way to go with a story anyway. I think I've mentioned before that I really like doing sound design that more so symbolizes what's going on inside of the character's head, like their psychological state, rather than what's literally happening. I think it's more fun and interesting. So I did try to do a lot of that, even though I didn't do a lot of typical sound design. I kind of tried to make up for it, so to speak. Let me know what you all thought of the story, if you liked how I released it. A couple people didn't like how the parts didn't have numbers, but the story was unique in the sense that, like most series I do, it's just like the name of the series, part 1, part 2, part 3. But with this series, all of the stories had standalone names, and so instead of doing a long title explaining it or something, I just would flash up something at the beginning saying, hey, here's the other parts, link in the description. Some people seem to not like that, but, you know, let me know what you thought. Did you notice it? Were you confused because you started listening and had no idea what was going on? Because I figured it might be a problem since I'm sure a lot of people don't just stare at the screen once they put a narration on to listen to. But I hope I did all right. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you so much, Hugh, for writing this story for me. You were a fantastic joy to work with. And I hope you all have a great night.